I think every salesperson knows that this degree is not worth anything when it comes to sales, right? It doesn't matter if you're in an Ivy League. It doesn't matter. No matter where you did it, your degree is not going to help you. You have to have the personality. You have to be sharp. You have to know how to sell things.
Yo, what's happening, people? Welcome back to Catch the Zenith. My guest today is Miloš Jovanović. Miloš is a finance consultant, master's graduate, and one of my best friends. University degrees are under more pressure than ever. With online programs, coaching, and companies hiring for skills over diplomas, many are asking, is college still the best way to learn or to acquire high-income skills? Get ready to learn whether university is still worth it, what growing up with a single mom taught him, how deleting social media changed his life, how political content fuels artificial rage, why being conservative today might be the old middle, why truth is the key to authenticity, whether everyone is a little racist, why cracking jokes across everybody is important, plus a lot more. If you are new here, I'm Nicola, a 27-year-old entrepreneur, and on this podcast, I share my mistakes, what I'm learning, and insights from the people I interview. Expect episodes on high performance and business. And as a thank you for tuning in, I've spent 4 months putting together a curated list of the 100 plus most interesting and impactful podcast episodes I've ever listened to. You will also get my top 10 all-time favorites, plus my best picks on wealth, health, and relationships. Just click the link in the description to grab the list for free and get signed up to my newsletter as well. And now, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show. Miloš Jovanović, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. How's it going?
First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And it's a big honor to be here the third time. I'm a third-time guest on this podcast, so I feel honored for the third invitation. Thank you.
I feel honored, my friend. Absolutely. It's great to have you on again. And we recorded so far 2 podcast episodes, both in 2020. Yep. And the last time we spoke, 5 years ago, which is wild.
Yeah.
Back then we talked about the return on investment of going to business school. So undergrad, grad degree. And you were just getting started at that time with your graduate degree, your master's degree. Mm-hmm. And now you recently wrapped it up, if I'm not right.
Yes, exactly.
Mistaken.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Now looking back, what's your honest take? Was it worth it? Would you do it again, both bachelor and master's?
That's a tough question now, 5 years later. I think, generally speaking, I think that this degree still holds the same weight as it did 5 years ago or maybe 10 years ago. I think it's good to have it, But would I proceed the same way? Maybe I even talked 5 years ago about that, but there are like higher technical schools here in Switzerland called FH, Fachhochschule, right? Where you can combine basically the same knowledge, maybe with less depth, but more practical appliance, And I think maybe that would be a way that I would go, or consider at least now retrospectively. But at the end of the day, I'm still quite convinced that the usual degree via university is just based on the weight, just a better thing to go for if you have the capacity, of course. But things are hard. People have to earn money. Studying that hard is a full-time job. If you look at it like that, of course you can combine somehow. But I think it's a better way to go. It's more respected, I think, in the workplace.
So mainly the point is it's more respected. It's like the conventional way of doing it.
I don't know if it's conventional, but I think as we talked about it also during studies, the signaling that you give with such a degree is that you are capable to understand very deep concepts of economics, deep concepts of business, And I think this signal is worth more than maybe 2 or 3 years of practical experience, So yeah, I think that signal is just better. And that in combination, if you are lucky enough to work somewhere or get a job somewhere, and having that also, so a university degree, a master's degree, for example, I think that combination is, at the end of the day, in the long run, is just going to be better and work better for everyone.
And that's an interesting take on it, because, I'm curious what you think about that. So I also will soon graduate with my master's, and I'm very grateful for bachelor, for master's, definitely.
Yeah.
But in terms of technical knowledge, I'm not necessarily sure anymore if that's the most efficient way how to gain high income skills. So let me explain. After my undergrad time, bachelor's degree, I would mainly say what I've learned during that time is if you work hard, consistently hard, you will get your degree. You will get something. Yeah, you will attain something, your goal.
Yeah.
At that time, it was to graduate, and that's a good learning, definitely. So I increased my work capacity, which was lower beforehand. That's a good thing. But in terms of, let's say, skills that I can use in the workforce, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that if that's the most efficient way, because after graduating, then working for a year in an internship, and then before starting my graduate degree at the University of St. Gallen, I purchased a coaching program in the US. It was quite a large investment at that point. I saved quite a bunch of money during my internship, and I invested those, I think, $8,000 US it was, into a coaching program helping you how to build your coaching business or coaching.
I understand, yeah.
Business, basically, like the fundamentals of business. And within 30 days, I had, I think, 5.5K in revenue, not everything cash collected, but I knew how to make money. And I was wondering then, okay, that's kind of interesting, because within 30 days, I knew how to make money. And it was kind of interesting. This program had 3 pillars. You had videos to watch, you had community with other people in the same cohort, more or less, that are also trying to build a coaching business. Yeah. And third, you had regular calls. You had, I think, 2 calls per day, like coaching calls, where you ask about what can I do better in my sales calls, in my cold outreaches, when getting new clients on board. Yeah. And I just thought, okay, that's interesting, because in such a short period, when you go all in on one thing, you can learn so fast. And I don't want to denigrate in no way the classical path, because I think there is also huge value. So not to understand me wrong here, but I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then going into my master's degree, I think because I opted for the University of St. Gallen, I learned there in terms of practical knowledge quite a bunch, because they actually make you to work on practical cases, which is pretty helpful. We also needed to start, basically co-found our own startup, which was cool. So I learned also a lot, but I think would make me wonder, okay, yeah, different times and alternative ways of gaining knowledge are getting bigger and bigger, I think.
You're absolutely right about that one. What I meant beforehand was from an academic perspective. So just equipping yourself with the, let's say, broad needed knowledge to understand almost every aspect of economics and businesses, right? But you're absolutely right in saying that having coaching to coach a specific skill, which will give you insights into something that you are actually trying to do, this is much more effective, and I'm pretty sure of that. So just for example, if I want to know how should I react to certain market conditions if I want to buy a specific asset, let's say that, okay? I'm not going to look into my books from economics. I'm going to watch a YouTube video from some guy who has experience there and explains that to me. So trying to build something for yourself and developing a specific skill which is needed for which is happening in the real world, like selling something or something like that, right? Or coaching someone. I guess there's it's a much more effective way to participate in these kind of coachings and learnings, direct videos from people who have experience, on-hand experience. I'm totally certain about that. I was just talking about the combination of having hands-on experience in something that you do. First of all, you have to find a job, but if you can support that with this academic framework which we have obtained in the studies, I think that's just valuable. Do you understand where I'm coming from? It's
totally,
not.
Yeah.
I do absolutely agree with you with the coaching stuff, because you're going to learn much more, and it's much more interesting because you're learning something that you're planning on doing in the future for yourself. For example, you wanted to coach people, and then you listen to someone who actually has experience and knew how to teach that to you, and you don't get that in the conventional way. Let's say I don't think that's happening in university. It's just the academic tool equipment phase that you're going through there, and most of that is not even applicable to real life scenarios in most cases, right? So I think university is preparing you to become maybe a good researcher, right? Or going into research, but hands-on business, real life experiences, that's university is not the way to go. I was just talking about the signal, the effect of signaling your mental capabilities, if you want to say it like that. I hope I made that clear. I don't know if I have to go deeper into that. Maybe yes. I don't know.
No, I definitely understand your point. You said the point of signaling.
Yeah.
I think also, like, especially large corporations, they like to see a degree.
Yeah.
But also that is a little bit shaky at the moment. I think more in Europe for sure, large corporations where you climb up the corporate ladder. When getting into the workforce there, you need to show your degree, obviously. They see that as not necessarily that you're super, super skilled, but maybe you are intelligent and maybe you are able to work hard.
Exactly.
That's something, But interestingly, I've recently seen Elon Musk talking about that. He said, or there was an example, I think he was hiring an engineer or some engineers for one of his companies. And what he was doing is he pulled up he shared a case study. They needed to code something.
Yeah.
And the person who coded it in the best way or gave the best output would get the job. And I found that interesting because now it's more focused on the particular skill and not anymore on the degree. And I think in the US, it's already way more advanced that, hey, you can have an Ivy League degree or coming from a top university, but you also need to be skilled, obviously. And the signaling aspect, I think, still important, but because Elon also talked about his workforce ranges from 18 years old to 70 years old. It doesn't really matter. Like, are you good at what you do? And there's another example of Alex Ramosi, the owner of acquisition.com, which is a family office, basically a private equity, doing right now private equity. His portfolio is doing, I think, over 250 million in annual revenue. And he hired one guy, 18 years old, but he's very good at editing short form content. I presume it was that. And he was good at that, so he hired him. And I think that's a pretty optimistic way of thinking about in general, that hey, you can get a job if you're good at something. You don't need like a fancy degree. Also, if you're from a country where you don't have fancy universities, if you're good at what you're doing, you still can get a job. I think that's cool. Yeah,
it is cool. I think that's even how it should be. I think that's how the world should work, and how the world, the work sphere should work, and companies should think. Let's hire the guy or the person that is the most skilled, and not has influential parents or an Ivy League degree or something like that. I'm absolutely convinced that should be the way, but it isn't. And I think the reason it isn't is because there are too many people who are applying for stuff, right? And let's say, I mean, if you're a small company and you have a specific opening for someone who has to code something, right? You can set up like a little test or like a little challenge that they can do, and the best one is going to get chosen, right? But if you have like 100,000 people who have to apply for or who are going to apply for that, you cannot do that. I think companies don't have the resources to test this intensively to find the perfect person for that job. So there's like the degree is like a proxy in that case, I think. But I'm with you when you say this thinking is fading away, especially in the US. I think that is happening. The degrees are not as popular as they were, especially Ivy League degrees. As far as I know, they dropped in popularity. I think because only because you have a degree and because you're able to sit down on your table and learn something, or have a little bit of talent of keeping things in your brain, doesn't mean that you're going to be someone good as a worker, or good at your job that you're trying to do. But I come from the experience that I'm pursuing a career in asset management and portfolio management, right? And for me, it is certain that I cannot do that without having a CFA, for example, which is why I'm doing it right now. I think I have the knowledge and capabilities to start as a junior portfolio manager somewhere, but I'm not going to get through with it without the CFA. That's just how it is. That's how the markets work. Maybe because the people who are in charge right now come from this old school background, right? For them, that's just how it should be, and that's the standard, right? And as long as I live in this world, I probably have to adapt and do my CFA. But if I imagine that I am in charge and I'm hiring someone, I'd rather hire someone who has the skill and not the degrees, instead of the other way around. I'm absolutely with you when it comes to that.
We spoke about, okay, in the US it's perhaps more prevalent that they focus now more on skills, less on the degree, although in some industries it's still important. Yeah, I'm also pretty optimistic that's more and more swapping over to Europe. We've seen that already right now. Basically, I'm in a position, I'm really grateful for that I was starting a B2B SaaS company, B2B software as a service company or startup, 15 employees. And the degree is not that important when I had my interviews. Actually, not too much. I could say like I had in the last semester, I had 3 straight A's and grade marks and so on. But okay, can you sell? That's a better question, because it's a sales role. Yeah. Sales development representative, a fancy word for someone who's setting appointments to show the product we want to sell. And I think it depends a little bit on what industry, and is it a large corporate or is it a small startup? It depends a little bit. And I would push back a little bit on the point of, I think Elon shows it pretty impressively that although he has such huge companies, he's still able to choose high performance employees. You know what I mean? Although I understand your point, but if you want he created multiple huge companies, and his culture is, if you want to be here, you're gonna work like crazy. Because I talked to one guy, he's I think 55 years old, maybe 60, family father. And he worked at Tesla, was in Salt Lake City when I did there an internship. And he told me, hey, I was working 7 days per week. I know time off. And if you don't do that, if you don't work 7 days a week, you're gone. You get laid off, basically. That's the game you're playing. But I would make the argument, people who want to work all the time, they love Elon. People who want more work-life balance, they will not like it there. That's another topic to cover. But what I'm basically saying is, I think it's still possible, although you are a huge corporation, to still raise the bars and find people that are so qualified. Although it's hard and it requires a lot of time. Yeah. But you know what I mean?
I understand. But I mean, imagine trying to find consistently, hard-working people that are ready or that really want to work 7 days a week. I mean, that's crazy. Where can you find all these people? It's hard, especially in today's world. I think it's getting even harder with the new generations coming. Wanting more life than work in the balance. But yeah, it's possible, and I think even big corporations can do that. But I wanted to isolate a point that you mentioned before. I think it also depends on what your role is going to be. So there are some things like selling or sales that are just not covered too much in all these degrees, and I think every salesperson knows that this degree is not worth anything when it comes to sales, right? It doesn't matter if you're in an Ivy League, it doesn't matter, no matter where you did it, your degree is not going to help you. You have to have the personality, you have to be sharp, you have to know how to sell things, and that's, I think, this skill set, for this specific skill set, I also wouldn't never consider a degree, right? But maybe for other things the degree is going to help, or the degree is more, the degree covers more of the things that are actually needed on the job. So I think it also depends on the role, is what I wanted to say.
I love that point. Good point. Yeah, like I would presume going into private equity, some business schools have definitely they give you a great skill set according to what you need there. I'm also like thinking back to my time at the University of St. Gallen, writing now my master thesis. They're making definitely an effort to prepare you well for whether you're going into strategy consulting, like think of McKinsey, BCG, Boston Consulting Group, or Bain & Companies to work there. But also if you want to start your own business, they try to make an effort to prepare you on that front, as well as like investment banking perhaps. Maybe my master program wasn't suitable. There you have, I think, others that are better equipping you, like banking and finance stuff, but because I did general management basically. And also, like for depends a little bit. And they are trying to make an effort. I think my main point is simply, is it still the most efficient path to gain fast, high-income skills? And I would make the argument that not anymore. Because I think of, to university, there are different aspects interesting. And I'm caveating out, I just want to mention, I'm very grateful for the entire education path I had a chance to go through. That's for sure. But like,
me too.
That's out of question. Just think like you can gain that's an example perhaps. YouTube videos nowadays have such a high quality. Alex Hormozzi's videos, we mentioned beforehand, they are super good. He built up 4 companies to a lot of revenue. Now he's investing in other companies. He knows what he's doing. And he's an exceptional educator. That is quite rare among successful entrepreneurs. A lot of them are pretty skilled in entrepreneurship, building up companies. But when it comes to teaching those concepts, how they make money, they are not that good. And he's very good at that. And I would make the argument, the reason for that is he uses simple language. He has this frame of use 3rd grade reading level when communicating, because it makes it easier for the intelligent people. They need to spend less time, and also for the not so intelligent people as well, obviously. Like intelligent people understand it anyway, but they can understand it faster, and not so intelligent people, they won't understand it at all.
Of course,
that's a good thing. Point being, university, like for the knowledge I go on YouTube and I have better quality, more efficient, or I buy a coaching program. And then when it comes to the community aspect, I would say it's still interesting, obviously, university. You can bond with a lot of people there. You get to know pretty smart people, like especially if I'm thinking of the University of St. Gallen. Obviously, you have a lot of people, they get into very fancy jobs, executive positions, etc. later in their career. So that's cool. You get to know interesting people.
Yeah.
But I would make the argument you still can get to know those kind of people also when purchasing, for instance, a coaching program or joining a community online. Like school.com is like the new Facebook for communities. You can find communities for everything, like literally almost for everything. Like if you're a dentist, you can find a dentist group. If you're a physician, if you're a plumber, if you're a salesman, you can find everything, you know.
Okay.
And that's interesting. And then you can also connect with people. Maybe it's less in person because it's online, but still you could meet up. So just interesting, you know.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't want to denigrate by no means the universities. They are also interesting for that reason. But I think they need to take care that they don't lose that privilege.
They need to hear that.
They need to hear that right now. Otherwise, if alternative education paths, give you another example. Jordan Peterson, you know him, Dr. Jordan Peterson. Because he had a pretty hard time, I think, at the University of Toronto, if I remember, or different university. Yeah. He taught at different university, Harvard, McGill, etc. And after a certain period, he decided not anymore to work there because of all that DEI stuff that's going on, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Literally making people to lie at certain, basically lie, because they need to write like a statement and about stuff they don't really agree. And so he pulled out. And now he started, I think, in the beginning of this year, Peterson Academy.
I know that.
And that's interesting because what he's trying to do is bring together the best professors in the world and teach the course they always wanted to teach. That's interesting. And free from any kind of ideology. You know, they do what you want to do, teach the course you always wanted to teach. And they do that in a manner, they have super high production quality. It's literally like a cinema movie. It's crazy, you know. And they have also a large community there where they use the best aspects. They pick the best aspects from social media and created their own social media where every student is part of the game, basically. And it's pretty peaceful and also interesting. It's pretty affordable. You know, in Switzerland, we have the privilege. We don't pay that much fees, which is crazy if we compare it to the US where they need to lay down like student loan and all those stories. That's crazy, you know. But and Peterson, they started, I think, with $5.99. Now they are at $3.99 per year for every month. 4 new courses, like full university courses, are uploaded. And they already have quite a bunch online, maybe 30, I'm not sure.
Yeah. And
they're also planning 2 things: to get perhaps accreditation. So they maybe it's like a full-fledged degree you get through that, maybe after, but they don't want to, they are a little bit careful, I think, a little bit hesitant, because maybe then they need to follow their doctrine of those institutions that make the accreditation, and that could be again an issue. But on the other side, if that doesn't work out, they still are able to connect the graduates with potential employers, which is interesting.
Yeah, this is interesting,
And also, again, interesting I think Peterson talked about that. He's trying to create some kind of a system where he brings together potential Elon Musks or very smart people from all over the world, but that are in positions that maybe they don't have access to a great university or not, whatever, they are not in a nice situation. And to bring them together, to pool those smart people and connect them with potential employers. That's also interesting.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
All this to say that I think universities, it's a great place, but they need to have open eyes and look out for how we can improve the experience for the students. Otherwise, long-term wise, maybe or mid-term, they will pull out and opt for another path to gain knowledge.
Yeah, I think so. You're very right about that. I want to pick up on the point that you said about Alex Hormozi being able to teach in a simple way, and I wanted to interrupt there, but I didn't interrupt. That's what's missing in the universities. In most of the universities, that's what's missing. The people that lecture there are very, very capable in their own ways, but they're not good at giving that knowledge to the people that are sitting there in the classes, right? And as you said, from YouTube, you have absolute experts in communicating content, doing very, very, very high quality videos about everything. So there's nothing you cannot learn on YouTube at this moment, no matter what it is. And what I wanted to say, the way you phrase your question, is a university the most efficient way to acquire a high income skill? I would say no. I was more responding to the question, is it worth doing a degree nowadays? And I would still say yes today, because the people in charge right now, I'm talking about employment. I'm not coming from the self-made entrepreneurship side. I'm just saying, for employment, I think a degree is still a good thing to do, but it's definitely not the most effective way to acquire a high income skill. That's absolutely certain. Or I'm absolutely certain about that.
Tell me more about that.
I mean, as I already said, so a university degree has a signal for big corporations, combined with work experience. This is going to give you this makes you marketable, right? So having a good degree and having hands-on experience in something you did, right? This combination is still strong, I think. But if you want to acquire a specific skill, let's say like sales or just something else, coding, for example. You want to learn how to code, AI programs and language learning models and everything. A degree is not going to help you with that. So if someone is searching a specific skill and is going to test for that, you're not going to be prepared with your degree. It's just not happening. This is not the way it is. So you have to learn yourself just by sheer interest. You have to have the interest and the passion for something, and you have to be willing to learn it on your own terms, by way of YouTube, by way of some coaching program or whatever it is, a book or something from a hands-on professional, right? And then you have to learn these skills for yourself through these ways, but you're not going to do that through university. Not specific skills, especially modern skills that are required in coding and stuff like that, but also sales, for example. There's no... maybe there is, maybe I don't know about it, but I think there's no renowned degree for sales or marketing. Maybe marketing, yes, but sales, I think there's no I think that there's no degree where people say, okay, he made his degree there, he's absolutely good at selling. I don't think that exists. So yeah, I think summarize the points that we mentioned beforehand. But that is how I think about it. Yeah. So to be honest, just to give you an example of how I learn today. I mean, I'm preparing for my CFA exam in August, and sometimes there's a company called Schweser in English. They're like the official, preparation material provider for CFA exams, okay? And I have their whole package, and it's really helpful and really good. I really have to say that's good material. But sometimes there's something that's just not very clear to me. And what do you think? How do I approach that? I go to ChatGPT and write my question in my own words and try to find out or give a prompt to ChatGPT to explain it to me in a language understandable to me, right? Or I go on YouTube and watch a video about it, or I go to Investopedia and learn something different, or just a different phrasing is maybe enough sometimes to give you the click that you understand something. So this do-it-yourself learning mechanism. This is getting more and more popular, I think, and you can really acquire skills through that and knowledge, right? So I just thought that would be a good example for that question. Yeah.
Ali Abdal has this quote: "We often tell ourselves that we can't teach someone something because we are not an expert at it.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, that's not true. In fact, C.S. Lewis talks about this thing called the curse of knowledge, which is that when you're trying to learn something, we often don't learn best from experts. Instead, we learn best from people who are just one step in front of us along the same journey."
I think that's very true.
And I think that underlines the point where sometimes university professors struggle.
Mm-hmm.
They are too far ahead to teach a student what they should teach.
Mm-hmm.
Not all. They are pretty
Yeah.
good professors. That's my caveat here. Pretty good. But sometimes it can be quite, I think, sometimes learning from people that are maybe 1, 2, or 3 steps ahead
Mm-hmm.
is like it's more helpful than learning from someone who's way too far, who can really understand what are the students' pain points, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I have to say, in the framework of a university, the people who are teaching you there are people who are most probably researchers, and that is mostly not the way that students want to go, right? And at the point of research, things that can be applied in real world scenarios and could be quite simple are brought to a level that is so abstract that this connection doesn't happen between the students and the university professors, for example. But I always, and it's this happened every, like 10 out of 10 times where I listen to someone. As soon as someone who is practically involved in something, not a doctor, triple doctor, researcher, just someone who's hands-on, has hands-on experience and comes and gives like a guest lecture, right? Things are so more palpable when you have them speak about it like that in this real world terms, University is sometimes just too abstract. And this is exactly what doesn't happen if you go through coaching, if you go through YouTube or anything else. These are people that know where you are and know what you understand or how they can communicate to you. They're not too far somewhere in the clouds with the abstract ideas, and research papers and everything. Of course, you can have very good insights, but it's the way you present it, right? The way how you draw conclusions for real life scenarios. It's not, explaining the whole framework of some study, It's just better if you bring the conclusions and the actual insights from these papers, apply it to the real world, and tell me what happened when you did that, right? And this is the approach that people on YouTube, people on through coaching programs are going for, and yeah, that's much more effective, I think.
Alex Hormozi said once, the best book, and I'm paraphrasing, the best book on sales is your first sales call, or let's say doing sales, and not reading about sales. That is the gist. And I think the reason for that is when we do stuff, we get to learn the nuances, the details. Like, how is it to run a sales call? Which question do I need to ask in this situation? How do I overcome this objection? And although you can learn about that in theory, it's just like, I think if we have 100% and how much learning is coming from doing and how much learning is coming from learning about it in theory, I would presume it's like maybe 10 or 20% theory and 80% doing. So why not shortcut that? That's the thing. Why not shortcut and directly go to work on the job and gain the knowledge? And again, there are universities, they're making effort for that. At the University of St. Gallen, I had those case studies and starting your own business and working with real companies together, you have that to a certain degree there. So that's very good. More power to them, and more of that, please. But just pure theoretical stuff can also be interesting if you're optimizing to become a top-notch researcher. But I think it helps almost everybody to have a little bit practical knowledge and know how the real world is running, basically.
Yeah. I wanted just to emphasize one point about signaling and filtering people and applications, if we think about large companies with, established HR systems and everything, you have thousands of applications for one single role, right? And I think I don't know, I'm not a HR person, but I think they probably have a pile of applications, and they just skim through it based on the most, superficial things that they can see.
They actually have some algorithms. Sorry if I interrupt you.
Yeah,
but
of course, yeah.
Like they let the AI, for instance, skim the CVs, and they just want to see certain keywords. And if the CV has certain keywords in it, next round or next stage.
You see, so
crazy, yeah.
I mean, that's very superficial, and I think as long as these processes keep being superficial like that, degrees are going to help in some way. Of course, experience and other acquired skills through different methods is very good, especially when you are in the job and you can show them and you can show people what you've actually learned, and not through your degree but other things, right? And but I just think as long as the system is as it is, but it's going to change probably in due time. But as long as it stays like it is, I think a degree is going to help. But it is definitely not the most efficient way to acquire high income skills. That I'm absolutely certain of that. Just as a summary of my humble opinion on that.
One thing we touched upon was using third grade reading level in your speech, maybe in your writing to a certain degree, because if there's a professor using fancy language and beforehand you haven't done maybe proper preparation, or you just don't know stuff, which is most likely if you get into your undergrad. And I remember myself sitting there and listening to Professor Gantenbein, which is what at that time the dean of the business administration faculty in Basel in Switzerland. I really like him. He's a cool guy, so we have huge admiration for him, that's for sure. But he has a good pace when talking, and also he uses jargon language, language that requires some pre-knowledge about it. And I think that's still important. Obviously, it has its reasons, but I think why not? Like, if I watch those, if we are talking about starting your business and acquiring fast, very good skills, why not simplifying the language, and instead of saying something complicated, you say it easier, say it with, and Hormozy is pretty good at that. He's trying to, instead of saying something with a 9th grade reading level, say it with 3rd grade reading level, and say it in a concise manner, in a succinct manner, where you use the shortest way, the shortest sentence possible you use, basically, to convey the message. Yeah. And I think that's challenging. And that's the reason why a lot of people don't do it and hide behind difficult language. And sometimes I do it myself. Yeah. But simply knowing about that very much helped me to talk maybe a little bit more succinct.
Because this is a skill in itself to translate your very knowledgeable and professional language into this third grade reading level language. That's a skill in itself. And people don't have that skill. Most of the I guess professors don't have that skill. That's just sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to say that that's something hard. I think it's not easy to speak in simple terms to convey a complex message. It's not easy. I think that's very complicated, actually.
It's like instead of saying to convey the message, to make a point.
To make a point. or say stuff.
To say stuff.
Yeah.
But I love ChatGPT for that. Like, you know how many times I used this prompt, like rewrite it in third grade reading level, or simplify it, use simpler terms, use conversational terms.
Yeah.
Especially when I created a pitch deck for my last startup project. Like, I use it so many times, and it's so helpful. And to that day, in so many emails, like I do the investor relations at Swisspreneur, and sometimes like GPT gives me like blah blah blah, like emails where you think like, okay, simplify it and less fancy words, and then you give it, you iterate, and then you have the final email that you can use, and people will understand stuff. Otherwise, it's quite hard. And there's what popped into my mind was Richard Feynman. He's, I think, the most famous physicist, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm mistaken, but he had a pretty good understanding of his disciplines, I think physics and so on, but also how to approach life. And he had one technique that goes like this. If you can't explain something to a child, you haven't really understood it.
That's a good point.
And I really love that. It's so obvious and so simple, but not that much people follow it. Like, can you explain your discipline, like about what it is, to a 4-year-old child? And I struggle all the time with that, because there are some things I assume I know, that I know the definitions, but then like explain to someone, I realize, okay, I don't know shit about that,
I understand, yeah. Just a sweet point about ChatGPT. Sometimes when it responds to my prompts, it puts also some little icons and emojis in it. So it's really so simplifying that I sometimes feel like a child. It it treats me like a child sometimes, but it's very sweet, and I understand the message at the end of the day, and that's what it should do. That's what it should do. But yeah, that's a good point, that quote that you said there. Yeah.
Hormozy once I got asked multiple times, why are you writing books like for little children? Because if you like open one of his books, like $100 million offers or $100 million leads, you think like, this is written for a little child, pictures and huge fonts and graphs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or mainly maybe illustrations. And then he actually answered that question at the beginning of $100 million leads. And he said, like, I want a book that I would like to read. And he has a pretty short attention span. Okay. So he would like something that is succinct, has a lot of pictures in it. And I think, at least I speak for me, if I remember, like, going through books as a child, I very much loved how many pictures there are inside, and because it's easier, it's short, it's more digestible. And again, like, he made it simple for people. Big pictures, like illustrations, simple language, and people will consume it more on average if it's in that format. As opposed to complex scientific paper language. If you're writing a book for a broad audience, like, I think that's a good way to good.
Yeah, I think so.
And I have seen recently another example, other book called Cold Calling Sucks, and That's Why It Works. It basically is all about how to cold call people
it's a good
to
name
sell.
for a book,
And it's written the same manner, and it's very, very niche. It's about B2B cold calling, like how to sell something to stranger, or at least to bring them to a point where they book an appointment with you. And they do the same, and it worked great. It has, and it's pretty good written at the same time, but it's simple, it's digestible, it's actionable. And I think there's a lot of books out there that are very interesting, but it's not very practical, and it's too complex. And that's just, I don't want to say like everybody can do how they want in the end.
Yeah, you're right.
That's totally fine. But at least for me as a consumer, I love such books.
Of course. I mean, all of this is also linked to, I mean, there's this thousands of year old saying that a picture says more than a thousand words, right? And it starts from a young age. As a child, you don't want to read anything. You just want pictures, right? And the more you understand language, the more it's okay for you to have a little bit of text with your picture. But I think this child, or this need for simple understanding, of things, is also very much needed in later stages of your life, of your career, of everything. And communicate ideas with as simple as possible and with pictures, and you're gonna have a good audience and a very happy audience. I think that's how it should be. Yeah. And I didn't read all the books that you mentioned there, but generally speaking, if there are books that I remember, they're mostly simple. Yeah.
Just popped something in my mind that was, I made the point now that I love those books, but maybe it's also my own insufficiency to understand certain things, and I need to still get better in the English language, or in that language in general, which is also an argument to get better, because I became let's say for the past 2-3 years, since I switched my podcast to English, taking notes to English, reading English books, I've become very obsessed with the English language. Like, how can I say this more succinct, or how can I explain this using, let's say, more conversational English USA language, basically. And because I realized when listening to, let's say, a Joe Rogan or a Chris Williamson, host of Modern Wisdom, or Tim Ferriss, or Jordan Peterson for that matter, like, it's still different, They're way ahead. And I think part of the reason is they have so many reps under their belt. They had so many conversations. They are pretty good at what they do, obviously. They put in a lot of work. And knowing that where I could be if I continue doing that, I really like that. And right now I try to expose myself to the English language wherever possible. Like I just told podcasts and so on, but also I sometimes brainstorm with ChatGPT. Like I use the voice mode. Maybe I pick up, like, you know what I did a few months ago? I wanted to explore the world of a craftsman. Someone who uses screwdrivers. And,
All right.
And there are so many tools they use and so many terminology I'm not familiar with within that realm, within that theme. And I want to explore what are the common words. And I learned quite a bunch, or I did a different thing.
That's interesting, yeah.
And I do that sometimes because...
In English?
In English, right.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'm sometimes really stuck when it, like, I have a bumper when it's going into really niche language. And, like,
but you can't possibly know everything,
Obviously, but
especially in these niches. But I think you can't be too hard on yourself, as you're not a native speaker, of course. And the people you mentioned back there, they're all native speakers, right? And especially, like, for example, Jordan Peterson. I mean, his level of commanding the English language and bending it the way he wants and explaining his, philosophical ideas. This is just a level that is very hard to obtain, especially for someone who is not native. And I think you can't be too hard on yourself regarding that point. But I think it's very good to, work on your own language skills when it comes to English. And I think you're very good, to be honest. I just want to give you these props here.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. But I really mean that. And, for someone who is not native, this is exceptional, It's really good.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, don't be too hard on yourself. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
But just quick sign on, like, this guy here sitting next to me, he has never done an English podcast, and your language doesn't not English, and I think that's top 1% of people sitting never had recorded an English podcast, not your native language, and speaking so proficient. That's also pretty remarkable. Just
Thank
to
you, my dear friend.
also
Thank you.
praises to you. I think we talked about Jordan Peterson, and I covered before my own insufficiency of like certain words I don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm currently reading the second time Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life, which is the second part of this 12 Rules for Life series. Great book, can highly recommend that. And he uses, on average, not very simple language. Or let's say, he still is concise, but the language is demanding. You need to really focus.
Yeah.
It's harder to read like at 9 p.m. in the evening when you're a little bit tired. You need to be focused.
Yeah.
Sometimes I still do it. Obviously, I like reading, but to really absorb what he's speaking about, yeah, it's quite challenging. But I still like that because then you see what you're capable of in terms of your language.
Yeah.
And again, those are different discussions, I believe. Writing a book for the broad audience with to gain practical skills that you can learn everything that's written there. And Jordan Peterson does that also to a certain degree, but he has, I think, just a high level that he puts on other people. He requires a certain literacy, let's put it like that, of people.
Yeah.
And that's fair enough, you know. It challenges you.
Yeah.
That's also, so that adds to my point. I like simple books, but also that is interesting to read, and it challenges you.
I think when it comes to complexity of the topics which are being discussed, so if you want to learn how to make a sale, that topic doesn't require a very high complexity in language, you know. But he, as someone, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this guy can't even go down a notch on his style of speaking, you know. I think he can't put it in a simpler way because he's wired like that, you know. He just is that academic in his mind, you know. He and especially these philosophical questions that he's you know, working on and talking about, they are so complex. You need someone like him to, you know, go through it and put it somehow presentable, you know, in a presentable way. I think it needs that, and the complexity he uses in his language is actually, in my opinion, necessary to speak about these complex topics of the human mind, you know. But if we talk about practical skills and, you know, like sales, sorry, I'm always saying sales because that's the example that we used. But I think there you don't need that. You don't need that, and these are two different topics, you know. If I want to know something about the human mind and the human experience and the world and philosophical questions, religious topics and everything like that, I want to see and read and hear this complex language, because there are just some specific words that better describe something, you know. I don't know how to put it, but some complex words that, especially like someone like Jordan Peterson uses, are just the perfect word to capture a concept, and you couldn't simplify that. And it also, I think I wouldn't listen to him if he wouldn't speak the way he speaks. And also for someone who's not native, that's a nice challenge. That's a nice challenge to, you know, make progress in your own understanding of the language. So I'm very happy that he speaks like that, to be honest. But I understand, yeah, it's definitely challenging, and you have to be focused, and you have to listen very, very carefully and read very, very carefully to really understand what he said.
You would sacrifice clarity if you would perhaps simplify what he's describing, because he talks about biblical stories. And I agree with your point. He also, if I remember correctly, rewrote every single sentence in his first book, Maps for Meaning.
Rewrote?
He rewrote every single sentence, and he has one of his...
Why did he do that?
like to be as succinct and precise as possible, because
Okay.
one of his, or that's what I would presume, because one of his rules is like be precise in your speech.
Mm-hmm.
How you become precise in your speech, you read books, you write essays, you get very good at writing also, because writing is thinking.
Yeah.
I just found it very interesting. Like, okay, it has a reason why his books are selling, because he puts a lot of effort into it. And
Yeah.
if I think of an Alex Ramosi, he wrote, I think, 19 drafts in his second book. 19 drafts.
That's much.
Full rewrites, you know.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And I think that makes then a book, the difference between a mediocre book or an exceptional book that sells over and over again over a lifespan.
Yeah. It's a big difference. It's a big difference in how a book is written, if it's readable or not, if it's going to be popular or not. That's why there's just a handful of very good writers that are known in today's world, and the rest is just mediocre and maybe there for these whodunit type of books, and people want to have a little pleasure when they read something, but the big guns in literary works are very well known, and there are just a few of them, and a handful of them. Not everyone is that dedicated to his work and dedicated to really, really spread the message the way they wanted to spread it, And yeah, there are levels to this. Definitely.
One thing that I've noticed spending time with you, Miloš, was that you're pretty consistent when it comes to saying something and then actually doing it.
Okay.
And one thing that comes to mind is you deleted your social media accounts a few years ago.
Yeah.
Never went back.
Yeah.
And
you exposed me on that one.
I exposed you on that one.
Yeah.
And there's this this hypothetical scenario. If you're in prison and you are only allowed to do one call, who would you call? And at least I have a certain selection of people, and one person is definitely you. And
okay.
I think, and the reason for that is I see you as a pretty reliable friend, and you proved that also in some instances.
Thank you very much.
And now, what has that? First of all, where does that come from? Let's start with that. This reliability.
My reliability. Oh, that's. I think it's a little bit unhumble for me to pick up this and talk about me that way, but
it's super. Just mean like it's a super valuable skill, and a lot of people don't have reliability. And maybe that's interesting to learn from you how you build up reliability.
I think most of it. Okay, maybe I know the origin story of my reliability a little bit. Yeah, but it is quite personal. But I think it's not an issue to talk about that. As you already know, I was raised with a single mom and my brother, so father wasn't there, and I think I had to be there for her and reliable in that sense, respectable in that sense. And I think through my young life, growing up, I just became reliable because I had to be there for, my family. Let's just say my family. And this, let's say, seriousness of growing up like that made me reliable, I think. But to be honest, I wouldn't say that I am always reliable. I also had phases in my life where, I was just volatile a little bit. Maybe I said something and then, to this day, I'm having difficulties and issues, being on time, for example, for stuff. That's just my chaotic mind, and this has nothing to do with not respecting someone or not being honored to do something. It's nothing about that. But I just think I'm a little bit chaotic as a person, But I was working on myself, especially the last few years. Let's say the last 4 or 5 years, I'd say. I was trying to reorganize my being, my being, and being more reliable, being even more reliable if you say that I already was, but even being more reliable, focusing more on my path and where I want to be, and setting goals, being serious about things. I think that is something that came to my mind more recently and is present, but the basic reliability that I have probably comes from growing up the way I grew up. Not too bad. I had everything. God bless my mother. She's really a saint for me, at least. And my brother, of course. I love him. You know him. Great guy.
For sure.
Yeah, but I think that's probably where it comes from. The basis of my reliability comes from there because I had to be there for the people in my family. I think.
Give me an example of, like, how do you need it to take care?
I was the oldest man in the house. My mother saw me as her partner in a way that I was there to support her if she had a bad time. So I couldn't. Sometimes I couldn't do things, and I had to be there for her. I talked to her, or I was just at home. And there are other situations. I'm more the type of guy who forgets about these things, and I'm not an oversharer. I don't talk too much about these things. I don't think too much about these things. But there were definitely situations where I just had to be there, and I had to grow up faster and quicker. Also with being responsible for my little brother at that time, who has a condition, as you know, hemophilia. I had to take care of him and watch him and make sure that he doesn't injure himself in any way. I had to learn about that. I was able to use and give injections and use syringes with 5. I mean, my brother even had to learn earlier, but I also did. So I took responsibility there, to be someone anyone in my family can lean on, I think. And I don't have any specific, it doesn't come to mind right now any specific situation where I could say, yeah, this is where I was reliable, or that's where it comes from. But I think in general, just my upbringing will probably have a big influence on how I am today, I guess. And if reliability is one of these, characteristics that I harbor, in case you say that, then it is probably from that phase in my life, I guess. But thank you. It's very nice to hear something like that from a friend. So
you're very welcome.
Thank you, really. I can just I can only say that back to you. I mean, you're Mr. Reliable in my world.
Appreciate
in
that.
my world, you are the guy, when it comes to that. So yeah.
Thank you. So mainly taking on the responsibility early on.
Yeah.
For instance, with your brother was something that shaped this reliability.
I think so. Yeah. Responsibility and reliability is not the same, right?
It's like the precursor for...
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And it's very much correlated to each other, I mean, from reliability, if you are responsible for something, to keep that responsibility or to be valued for that responsibility, you have to be reliable, right? And I think I had that. That's maybe just something that is in me. That's just maybe I was born like that. Maybe I'm not sure, because there are probably people who have went through the same situation, but they're not reliable and they couldn't manage the situation, and maybe went on the wrong path, or had other struggles, and maybe didn't have a good relationship with their parents and everything like that. Took drugs or whatever. I think maybe it's just in me. I think that could be too. I developed my reliability even further with my upbringing, but I think the the very essence of it was probably always in me, I think.
I think that's a very positive sign for the people who had a similar situation like you had. Maybe you don't have father or mother, but still achieved a certain level of success. Why I'm bringing that up, I see now, that's what I observed. There are some people out there, and that's fine. Do whatever works for you. But this victim mentality of, okay, I had this circumstances, and that's the reason why I can't achieve X. But what I realized is you can, whatever you are blaming for your own misery is what you're giving power to. This is a concept I came across in Hormozzi's and Peterson's corpus of content. And just knowing that, hey, if I blame like, oh, my brain is wired like this, why can't I remember everything on the first go, or whatever it might be, I'm giving power to that.
Yeah.
Whereas if I just say, okay, hey, that's a good challenge and this will make me a better human being, and I use it as an opportunity to grow, I think, at least for me, it proved to be way more sustainable long-term wise, and to grow up and to get better in life in general.
Absolutely.
Because it's easy. I think it's the easier way out is always to blame something external, but it doesn't really help you. And
Never.
And it's interesting. Let's maybe apply that to a very difficult, complex situation. Imagine, I read about this story recently. Imagine there's a couple. They've been married for 40 years. And imagine after 40 years marriage, the husband has cheated on his wife. Most people would say it was purely on the man. And maybe it is, or to a large extent. And it's very difficult for both parties, mostly for the other person, for the women. And that's not nice. But asking then yourself the question, okay, I as the women or man, it depends who cheated, what have I contributed that we ended up in this situation? That's the way harder question. And it's uncomfortable, and you don't want to ask yourself that, because obviously the other person did a mistake, did a sin.
Yeah.
But still having this, let's say, this courage to say, okay, what have I done wrong? Maybe you haven't really, I gave him not that much warm atmosphere, whatever it might be. But I think that's more solution-oriented than just blaming then everything on something or someone, you know. And I'm not saying whatever is the right approach, but for me personally, also when other people do me wrong, I can, and there is some truth in that, but I can also ask myself, what could I have done better in that circumstance?
I mean, blaming, especially if you have hard evidence for something that someone did wrong, that's still an easy way out to not work on yourself and not progress as a person, right? Because definitely there's not always... I mean, even if you didn't do anything wrong and someone cheated on you, your first mistake was that you came together with that person and you didn't see the real person behind it, or a cheater or something, right? So you have to work on your skills to read people and know how they are, and not go into a 40-year marriage with them before knowing them, actually, right? So even if you did nothing wrong, but there are some cases where people do something wrong, or you I don't know, maybe the wife, you know, is not affectionate or not loving enough or not warm enough, and she was maybe beforehand, and this, you know, faded away, and she doesn't realize it, but he, you know, feels that and does a mistake, which is not commendable, right? But you shouldn't cheat on people, especially not if you're married. You shouldn't cheat at all, right? But yeah, there's always a story on the other side, and there's always a reason why people do stuff, and you should think about that. I think that's the best approach to look at something. When someone does you wrong, does something incorrect, and doesn't treat you well, there must be a reason. There must be a reason for it, and even if it's not your fault, you have to, I think, as to develop yourself, you have to think about it. You really have to think about it, and yeah. to get back to your point about victim mentality, this is something that I really, really don't like. I'm, especially me, I think that I could have many excuses to, I could have many things to blame for not, putting effort into something, or, describing the way I am. I could point to 1,000 of things in my life which would be a good socially good excuse to not do something, or to not try something, or to not get better in my life. And I really don't like that. I think you've given up on yourself at that point. When you start blaming everything else and not trying to find where you can push yourself to be something better, I think that's where you're giving up. And I really don't like that mentality. And always, every time I speak to people that go slightly in that direction, I always try to push them and say, hey, it doesn't matter. The circumstances can be hard. Sometimes things just doesn't fall the way you want them to fall. Stuff happens, right? But you have to go through it, and you have to work on yourself and just overcome it every time. And there are cheesy sayings like fall down, stand up, pick up your crown and walk on, and meme stuff like that. But I think there's a very much meaning to that, to these messages. And I'm someone who really, really thinks that way. I always blame myself first for everything I do. For every mistake I make, I'm the first to blame, and then everyone else.
What has that done to you, blaming you first?
Like I said, this led to me starting to improve myself 4 or 5 years ago, improve my situation. For example, I always, let's give you a very specific example. I finished my bachelor's degree, right? And I was someone who really wanted to start somewhere and get some experience and work, but in the field that I wanted to go. So economics, finance, banking, whatever it was. I was just searching for it. And there are, them programs, trainees and stuff like that, and just, normal jobs in this sphere where I could start. And I applied and applied and applied, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. And I was very well aware of my capabilities to, show that I'm worth it, that I'm worth being hired. I was pretty sure of that, but it just didn't work. And then instead of, being miserable and just saying, yeah, the system is that and that, and that's just not okay, I just thought, okay, it seems like some kind of work experience is respected in Switzerland, right? And I just thought, okay, if that doesn't work, I'm just going to go lower and do something else and just get some experience in any type of job. And what I did then is I went and, drove, did some transport stuff, right? Metropole, if courier, deliveries and stuff. Logistics, delivery and stuff like that. And I worked there for a year just to do something, right? Just to show also the world, like as we talked beforehand, signaling and everything, to signal the world that I'm able to work and that I want to work, right? So it isn't. I think I wasn't even there for a year, and an opportunity opened to myself to apply to a job at Northern Trust, right? And this is how I came in, and I think I got rewarded for not being sorry for myself and just go for it and don't give up, and then I got something, right? And I think that was a very big lesson for me to know. Hey, you just go, don't stop, don't let yourself be stopped from having not too good circumstances to get in somewhere. Who know what it could be? I'm not sure why I wasn't hired from in these trainee programs and everything, but I just thought, okay, if it doesn't work, just go on and try your best, and don't be sorry for yourself. And I think that helped. I don't know what it was in the end that I actually got a job then in the field, right? But it happened, and I think it was because I got my shit together, as people like to say, and just went on with it. Yeah.
I see there are multiple components I want to discuss. The first, you was not ashamed to go lower in the, let's say, hypothetical hierarchy.
Yeah.
You said, I don't give a fuck. I go down and I start there. And let's see which opportunities will come across my way.
Yeah.
And another thing is, you didn't have a father who was there raising you up. And if you were to blame then, let's say, your father for everything and not achieving anything, interestingly, there's always someone who had it worse and still succeeded.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they had those hard circumstances, they still succeeded. And now people will say it's easy for you, Nicola, to say that, but I think your example exemplifies exactly that. You could say, all my father, and I will never be successful because of him, or I will become successful despite having no father. I use that as a motivator, as a driver to attain a certain level of success. And especially you, I remember when you were in that situation, and I knew that you told me something on that note. You would go the extra mile if someone gives you the chance.
Yeah.
And and that's the beautiful thing. If you then have someone who gives you that chance, there are good people out there who are willing to give people who have maybe not all the internships, the degree from an elite uni, don't give a shit.
Yeah.
They still give you the opportunity because they see huge potential in you. And that's, I think, super, super beautiful especially for people who have had hard.
Yeah. And this is exactly what I'm doing, by the way. I'm still grateful for being given that opportunity to, go to Northern Trust. And I think
maybe
anyone
real quick,
could confirm that. Yeah.
Just before you quickly explain, like, where are you working and what are you doing? Just that we understand.
I'm working at Northern Trust. A big international bank based in the US in Chicago. They have many branches, and one of them, the most recent one actually, is in Switzerland, through Luxembourg somehow. And they bought in 2017. They bought the fund servicing, the asset servicing part of the of UBS fund management, and this is now Northern Trust. So when I started, I still was like some halfway UBS, halfway Northern Trust workforce, but now it's purely NT, and Northern Trust, is an American bank, and we're especially focused here on asset servicing. And what I'm doing is, my official job title is at the moment consultant in fund accounting. What my actual role comprises of fund accounting, of course, which is a big part of it, and also LP services. So
limited partner.
Exactly.
Services,
So limited partner services. One of our biggest clients there is a limited partner in many funds, and what we are doing is we're basically, doing the controlling, the gathering, the compliance checking, and payment instructing of all the activities that happen through these funds, right? And there are more than 200 funds that are invested in, mostly private equity, mostly in third world countries. And this is what I'm doing at the moment. And I'm doing that for 2 3/4 of a year now, I guess. That's how long I am in the field. And it's not very much, but since day one, since I got this opportunity, I really wanted to show my gratitude by, going the extra mile, as I said it to you back then. I didn't even know that I said that to you, but that's exactly what I'm doing, and what I will do until the last day of work there, if that's gonna happen, So yeah, that's how I roll.
Miloš, I quickly touch upon that you deleted all your social media accounts a few years ago.
Yes.
You haven't looked back since, and tell me exactly, so what has that done to you, your mind, your soul, maybe even your spirit? What changes have you noticed?
before I start, I have to admit one thing. I have a little side account on Instagram, which is just for memes. The name of the account is also in German, please, just memes. And this is for my friends to, and my girlfriend, of course, to send me specific stuff that could be funny. And I check that maybe a month, monthly, on a monthly basis, I think I check that. But even every time I say that I check it on a monthly basis, everyone around me says, no, that's not true. You're not doing that. So I'm even neglecting that one, But this is like my, exit opportunity in my, like my little, how do I say that? My,
still participating in the game to a certain degree.
I told my friends, hey, this account is really not to follow any one of you. I don't want to see your pictures or anything. It's just so you can send me memes or funny stuff or whatever you wanted to share with me. And I don't have to participate in the social part of that, but just, sharing stuff, which would be a little bit more inconvenient through WhatsApp, I just wanted to admit that before I talk like I'm the no social media guy. But yeah, I don't even know when it exactly was. But it was very organic how that happened, because I started to neglect my Instagram profile 2 years before I did the cut. And the only reason I did post something was because my girlfriend said, hey, why don't you post a new picture? Your last one is from 2 years ago. It was just more like a little bit of social pressure, which was going on.
I remember that account.
It's really a very humble account, and there's not much going on there.
To say the least.
To say the least. And this was very organic then, because I thought, hey, I really don't use it, actually. I have nothing from it. I never had something from, scrolling through. I don't know if even Reels existed back then, but, stories and stuff and pictures of people, unrealistic, wrong values, unrealistic lifestyles, all, what's going on the social media platforms. And I never had interest in that. So I didn't use it beforehand, and I was like, if I don't use it, why should I have it? There's absolutely no reason for me to have an Instagram account, for example. So I deleted Instagram, and then I thought, okay, Facebook even less. Who uses Facebook that's not older than 40 years old? So I deleted it. And then the only thing that I thought was helpful was LinkedIn, of course, because I don't see it as it is a social media platform in some ways. It actually is. It just is. But, there's something good you can take from there. So this one is just necessary, I think. In today's day and age, I think that's just necessary to have a LinkedIn account. But did it change me? Yeah, because the occasional time that I went to Instagram and scrolled to something, it always made me feel uncomfortable or unhappy. There's seldomly something good on Instagram that makes you feel like, oh yeah, that was a good scrolling session. I'm inspired or something. That didn't happen. That never happened. And I just feel more calm, maybe, because I really don't have to think about any of that. Nothing. I don't see anything. I don't even see the account of my girlfriend, I have no idea. Friends, nothing. I really value personal exchanges more, and, direct messages when people talk to me. This is much more valuable to me than, having a glimpse at some random photo on Instagram that I scroll through in bare seconds and, double tap and that's it, So, yeah, I think I feel better in general since I'm off the grid. I think
you said you're calmer. How so?
Calmer in the sense of there's not too much, irrelevant thoughts that come with, the exposure to Instagram. Let's say if you scroll through something and you see, some random guy who once again sleeps 2 hours a day and wakes up and does 400 morning routines and then is successful and millions and Lamborghinis and everything. I don't see that. So I don't think less of myself because of that. I'm calmer in the sense that the world can pass by me, and these guys can keep crazy and do crazy stuff and everything, but I'm more focused on the things that I really want to achieve. There's nothing distracting me. That's why I'm calm. That's why I'm saying calm. I think that's what I wanted to say.
You mentioned something in terms of you value in-person conversations.
Yeah.
There's something to it, like sending DMs or talking to someone over the phone or in person. It's different kind of things. I also, although I see some values with DMs, and especially when building a business and stuff like that, but I'm totally on your side. See that point as well. And you mentioned that you don't know what's going on very much about the world or on Instagram or whatever, even your girlfriend's account. I try to, because I'm still on those social media platforms, but I try to figure out a value-adding approach of using those socials. And one thing I try to do is I create, not consume. So I create posts with the goal of making people find my podcast, or somehow trying to. Can you say something?
Hello?
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah, works.
Somehow, like, publish content and people will find my podcast, or when I was doing my coaching business for that. But I try, and it happened, like, not to click any other stories of friends or like posts. I don't like participate in that game because there's a lot of signaling and stuff like that. And fair enough, I sometimes do the same, and I try to reduce it to a minimum. And when I open perhaps a story, it's more like Alex Ramosi. Can I learn something from that, or Chris Williamson or Jordan Peterson? But it's less like friend, and like that, I'm like not in that world, but I'm still in that world. But I use it for a value-adding purpose, and like that, I feel comfortable with it. I would prefer to delete it entirely because I don't really like the thing it does to your brain. Because the reason why I'm doing those podcasts is because it's long form, and long form improves your ability to focus. If someone's listening to this podcast, this person is perhaps used to consuming long-form content, like reading books or podcasts. Yeah. So that's a good thing, I would presume. Yeah. And they are doing something at the same time for their ability to focus for an extended period of time, because it requires, like, you need some cognitive attention to listen to such a conversation or to read a book. That's then, on the other hand, a good thing. Whereas if you're on social media, there is a lot of, let's say, short-term driven behavior, like likes and comments and lots of fast iteration feedback loops. That's the right word. And I think there's a article was published on when people were the most intelligent, and I think it went down in recent years a bit. And I'm not necessarily sure, but I would presume, like, one thing that has an impact on is our smartphones. And there are a lot of great things about smartphones, but there are also, if you don't use it in a conducive way, like to improve your life, make your life more efficient, it can also harm. It can be a malevolent device, so to speak.
Definitely.
But and then on the flip side, I really love Col Newport. He's the author of Deep Work, a great book about focused work, deep work basically. And in one of his books, I think it was, I'm not sure, Digital Minimalism perhaps, he talks about the phone as a Swiss Army knife. To look at a phone as a device that makes your life better, more efficient. Like, I don't know, calling someone, a quick WhatsApp message to say, hey, don't wait for me, I'm a little bit late, so start without me, whatever. Or navigation, for instance, or your to-do list. So there are a lot of useful applications. And to see it that way, that some kind of made a difference. And I think another aspect to it is also in terms of social media and smartphone is, like, I think a lot of people, they start first with they choose their social media platforms, the phone they use, the tools they use on their phone. But Cal Newport suggests to do the opposite, to say first get clear on your values. First define what kind of person you want to be. Like, okay, one of my values, for instance, in my case, is focus. One value is discipline. And then I ask myself, which means help me to live up to those values.
I see.
Do you understand? And that's a way more, I think, at least in my case, it helped me to a certain degree. And I did that like implicitly, I think, to use it more sustainable.
Yeah, I understand. I mean,
in a sustainable manner.
I absolutely agree. Of course, there are nuances to how you can use socials. You can very much influence your algorithm to actually see good content, right? This is possible if you use it the right way. It's just a much harder task than just shutting it off completely, right? But I understand from a business perspective or from a promotion perspective that you have to use these socials to just get your business across and bring it to the attention of a very, very big audience. I completely agree with that. It's just not the case with me, which is why it was very easy for me to delete the socials. But yeah, I think the approach to define your values and then acquire the needed gadgets to work on those values or obtain those values is probably the best approach to do things. And seeing your smartphone as a utility tool or some kind of Swiss Army knife is very good, because it actually is that, if you want it to be. It isn't just a distractor of your life. It can be a very good tool if you know how to use it, of course. And I think that's what my phone does for me. Of course, I consume media which sometimes isn't even necessary or doesn't help me in my life. On YouTube, for example, I mean, there's just some things that are just for entertainment, and that's okay. I think at least that it's okay. But I think my dosage of good content and just entertaining content, which is perfectly picked out for me through my algorithm, works fine. I think that works fine without the socials even. And for news, for example, for just what's happening in the world, I don't need Instagram for that, for example. I don't need Facebook, whatever. I'm subscribed to certain newspapers. I'm watching news content through YouTube, for example. So I don't miss a lot due to not being on socials. So therefore, I think I'm in a good place when it comes to that.
The world never stops going, no matter what. It's always the same game in the end.
And it is.
Or to a certain degree. You mentioned before, to reach a big audience and doing that. Interestingly, Cal Newport, contrarily, he has never had, I think, a social media account.
Okay.
And he's still pretty, let's say, he has pretty huge niche fame in this productivity world. I think part of the reason is his books. They're pretty good, like Deep Work, Digital Minimalism, World Without Emails. Another part to it is maybe his recent podcast endeavor. He's pursuing like a weekly, or he does a weekly podcast show where he answers deep questions about such topics, focus, productivity. And so it's definitely interesting. It's possible. I think it's not the rule. It's like the exception. And I think he reached people like...
But how does that happen,
I think...
In today's world especially.
Books. I think he was also on other podcast shows pretty often. Or sometimes. Not often, sometimes. Maybe that helped. And I think that's also part of it. He has some concepts that are very, very unique. And everybody knows them.
Okay.
Like, for instance, deep work, like focused work you're doing in order to achieve a certain level of quality in what you're producing, whatever you're producing. And simply this idea of, okay, in order to produce something of value, you need to sit without any distractions. And it's so simple as it sounds now, but for that idea, he's famous, and it helped a lot of people, including myself. And I think that's part of the reason. So very good content, podcasts, and his books.
I'm wondering the following. Is it possible that there are just more people that are wired, for example, like you, that seek this content more than I thought there are? Or did he just manage somehow, maybe by chance, through one podcast, and this is like this is especially in today's day and age, like an entry level to long form and good content, and people who start listening to podcasts with interesting, philosophers and whatever on them, they start reading their books and then they get into these types of contents, right? So I don't know if there are more people like you or like us than we think, or maybe it was just by chance that what was his name again? I don't know him.
Professor Carl Newport is his name.
Carl
C-A-L. I think that's the
nickname.
Okay,
all right. Carl Newport.
Newport, right?
Okay, yeah.
I just had a thought. Perhaps it's also okay. I said his content is pretty good. So what he writes in his book is pretty good. Then some YouTubers like Ali Abdaal, he's a productivity YouTuber from the UK. They picked up that content and they found it helpful and worth sharing with their audiences. They shared it, and then they got to know Carl Newport. I think that could be a reason why.
Is this the way you got to know Carl Newport?
Yeah, that's exactly how I got. And I think there are
through a podcast from someone who's in the
YouTube
game.
video actually, like short, like 10-20 minutes perhaps YouTube video of Ali Abdaal.
So the digital content was still needed for you to get to Newport. That's what I wanted to say. So there's like this entry point for especially young people. We just love podcasts, right? So the new generations, that is our long form format. The most of us listen to podcasts, not very much read books. And to get to know someone like that, you have to have a catalyst, like someone doing a podcast, right? To mention it, and then you say, "Oh, this is great, right? This is a good idea. This guy has good ideas," and then you buy his book maybe, and then you're getting into it. So Cal or Carl Newport doesn't have to publish digital content, but maybe he needs a catalyst.
I forgot to mention something, Miloš. That was he actually runs a blog for a significant amount of time, and he started, I think, a student blog, like student tips, how to learn better and stuff like that. And pretty early on in his career, he had a good book. How was the name? To be so good that people can't ignore you. Something on that.
All right.
Something like that. Become so good that people can't ignore you. Something like that.
Okay.
And it was a huge. At that point, it wasn't a huge success, but I think still his practice on his blog, which is still to that day, I think, online, at least the newer blog then.
Okay.
That also helped because back in the day, a lot of people read WordPress blogs, and maybe that's part of the reason why. Perhaps that also helped, I would say. And like you said, I think, and he's not anti against those like digital means at all. Like certain things he's also using, like podcast is also a digital method. But like I think that helped. Like other YouTubers referencing him. Yeah. And but I think the baseline for everything was his content. A lot of his content is quite good. Yeah,
it has to be. I mean, he wouldn't be recommended on a podcast if that wasn't the case, right? So, I mean, you have to have this quality to get there. So, maybe for him to be as good as he is, he doesn't need, digital content, but it somehow, spread the message and made him more popular maybe, which then even... this then got back to his old work, which you said it wasn't very popular in the beginning. But if people get to know him through a podcast and then start, looking at the things he wrote, and then they see, his first book was also great, and then this gets new popularity through this small catalyst, which was maybe one podcast. But I wanted to ask you something: is do you think that productivity content is a niche generally?
Good question. Chris Williamson, the host of Modern Wisdom, talked about that. He sometimes shared that because he's right now so successful, he's still successful in a niche to a certain degree. Niche fame, he calls it.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if productive still, to a certain degree, yes. Because a lot of people are not interested in that content at all, I would presume. Perhaps. I don't know. But it's interesting. I think I was just like dragged towards that content. I felt like an urge to watch those YouTube videos, to read those books like Atomic Habits and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and so on. And I just enjoyed it because I have a genuine curiosity for ideas, concepts, etc. If it's still a niche, maybe to a certain degree, I'm not, because, anybody's interested, or some people are interested in productivity.
Who wouldn't want to be more productive,
who wouldn't
right?
want to be productive? I would say more that world of productivity YouTubers and self-help, self-development podcasters like Chris Williamson, or to a certain degree Jordan Peterson or Stephen Bartlett, they are scratching sometimes the broader, let's say, like becoming mainstream to a certain degree, but they still have, I think, an audience that have some characteristics in common.
Yeah.
Like,
I think so.
Someone who's listening to Modern Wisdom, I would presume or suppose that they're interested in productivity, but also how to get to the best version of yourself, how to become very good in life.
Yeah.
And they listen maybe in general to podcasts, they read books, they have maybe a proper morning routine, they maybe don't drink any coffee because they have learned from Andrew Huberman that coffee in the morning, in the first 90 minutes is not that good because your adenosine systems are not ready to absorb it. And you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Because there are a lot of people out there, they live a pretty different life, and that's totally fine, So to a certain degree, yes. Now the question is, how big can be a niche that it's still called a niche? That's that. Maybe
because I don't think that it is a niche anymore. It was maybe. Yeah.
How would you define a niche? Maybe let's start like that. That we know what we are talking about.
I would say a niche is defined as a topic that is. I mean, that is very bland what I'm going to say right now, but a niche is for me defined as a topic which only a few specifically interested people care about, right? But how much or how many interested people is gonna be considered a niche? That is a very difficult question for me right now. But if we think, for example, of let's say Stephen Bartlett, I think his name was, right? He is maybe he is in that sphere somehow, I think, because some of the podcasts I saw with him, from him, and etc. Sounds very much like this is about developing yourself, being the best version of yourself, productivity and everything. And but I think he's very popular. I think I always how I measure this is, do I know him? If yes, it can't be niche anymore, because I'm not as curious as you are for these topics, right? I think you're I think probably the most curious guy or the most literate guy when it comes to these things that I know, and I'm not that way. I'm interested, of course, when I see something, when it catches my ear. Oh, okay, that sounds nice. That's something I will try to implement maybe in my life, and this doesn't happen very often because I think my algorithm already doesn't, give me too much of that content, I think, and I'm not seeking it actively. But when I come across it, I'm always happy to listen. And I think if I know, for example, if I know someone like Stephen Bartlett, right, then I think it's not niche anymore, probably, but I would still say that we overlap in our interests somehow. So if you're niche, then I'm probably niche too, but I have the feeling that if I know something, it can't be niche anymore because I'm not actively seeking the content, right? It's tough to define. I think it's tough to define. But yeah, sorry. What you?
No, I think that's a great litmus test that if you, Miloš, if you know about it, it's mainstream, then it's definitely...
But I wouldn't call myself mainstream, that's the thing.
No. Yeah. But if it approaches you, this message that, or the podcast, then
Yeah, I mean, for
some people know about it.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like 3 or 4 podcasters, and I knew 2 of them. I think 2 of the 4 or 5 you said.
Which one you knew?
Stephen Bartlett, and one of the first you said.
Jordan, Chris Williamson.
I don't know him,
Tim
for example.
Ferriss, Huberman.
Huberman, I know.
Okay.
Huberman, yeah.
Okay.
So Huberman and Stephen Bartlett. So I don't know. Do we have the same? I think we do have the same interests, but are we the target audience? Are we the same target audience if we overlap with these 2 guys? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because Stephen Bartlett, for example, he has Gary Neville or Patrice Evra on, which is very football oriented somehow. I mean, he's from England, if I'm not mistaken. Stephen Bartlett. And for example, Gary Neville is a big businessman nowadays, but he talked about how his insights from playing at Manchester United and being under pressure and everything led to him being the businessman he is now, right? And I don't know if that would be something that is interesting to you in terms of productivity content. Is that productivity content? If yes, then this is not a niche, I think. But if not, then it is.
Yeah. See what you're saying. I've definitely came across some characteristica that people attain that are in this self-improvement, self-help world.
Mm-hmm.
I think usually they pay attention on how many hours they sleep, maybe at what point, at what time, what they eat, and do they work out, and maybe they have like morning routines, some routines in place. Maybe they read self-help books or business books. Maybe they listen to those podcasts. Maybe they also have an open mind and they're curious. And it's still broad, obviously, because a lot of people have similar interests.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, because it's hard to say some of these podcasts like Stephen Bartlett with The Diary of a CEO, or also Jay Shetty, he is a former monk. To a certain degree, they try to go into the mainstream world by interviewing. What I've recently seen is Stephen Bartlett interviewing Michelle Obama, for instance. That's mainstream, definitely. At least from my perspective. But it's still cool, if they bring on different kind of people. But that goes, let's say, beyond that world. But it's still like those people achieved a certain level of success, maybe, and it's interesting to learn from them.
Yeah.
But I think some of them also went down that rabbit hole where talking about then like those maybe a little bit gossip. There are different podcasts. That's also the point. We are not talking about self-improvement, but sometimes they overlap with different categories, and there are also some podcasts where there is only gossiping, or there is more comedy, or there's more entertainment, and there is also some podcasts out there more edutainment, like education and entertainment.
Yeah, definitely.
It's hard to say, but yeah, long story short, I think it would be interesting to make like a survey to see what kind of characteristics they have. But what I want to say is I saw some people, they are kind of similar. They like few let's call them educators, like let's say a Jordan Peterson, a Chris Williamson, maybe Patrick Bet-David.
Yeah.
And it makes also sense because I don't know the exact statistic, but I think it's something like that. 1% of podcasts, or the top 5 or top 10 podcasts out there, capture 99% of the audience out there. So when you have a small show like me, there are obviously less listeners listening to that show.
Of course, yeah.
So it's a pretty competitive game. It's also a good thing. I think I like to improve. But what I'm saying is, I think, those folks out there that are in that self-improvement world, they have few shows and they listen to them over and over again, and maybe that's maybe an indicator they are in that niche. But it's still hard to say.
It is hard.
I think it's not a compelling argument I just made, but
it is actually. I mean, it's hard to differentiate sometimes, because the same host is going to have someone from comedy and then someone from self-improvement, for example. It's just, for example, a Joe Rogan, he captures, I think his podcast alone probably captures already 95% of everyone who listens podcasts, right? So everyone's going to find a good episode for himself there. And Joe Rogan is definitely not niche, right? He's not niche. But yeah, maybe some creators, some podcast hosts are a little bit more in, self-help and productivity content. And you are probably you are the type of person and the type of curious person that is probably the target audience, not even target audience, but just, a regular listener, I'd say. And the guys or that make quality content with regards to that topic. And I do not, but I think I came across multiple of them because I'm just vaguely interested, and if I hear something from that, then I'm gonna listen, right? And I just think that the difference between us two is that you seek it and I happen to come across it, maybe, and I think that we even have the same level of interest. It's just that I'm not actively pursuing it and you are, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's fair to say, but I think that's how it is. And I wouldn't call it niche, but I think there are not many people like you, for example. So I think you as a person are niche, and such a weird thing to say.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah,
I think, you're more unique than the average listener to different types of podcasts, but especially productivity podcasts, I'd say. And I'm just probably more the average podcast listener, I'd say. But there are definitely some podcasts that are niche and some that are less. But yeah, they overlap a lot, I think. They overlap a lot.
Yeah, in terms of niche podcasts, I think obviously we talk now about big shows. And there are a lot of smaller shows. There are then very, let's say, in the actual sense, a niche podcast, like someone's talking about, let's say, B2B software sales. That's very niche, for instance. Or let's say private equity investment in Switzerland. That's again very niche. Like, and I think there's some nuance to it, but I think we can conclude like, it's hard to say. Like, But we see a tendency, obviously. Everybody's listening to those self-help. They have a self-help podcast. They're interested in getting better and improving life. That's already a good starting point,
I think anyone should be, right?
Yeah,
anyone should be. I mean, why would you actively ignore good advice? I don't know. Maybe there are people who actively don't want to hear good advice, but I'm not one of them. I'm just not, I don't know. I don't know too many of them, but I'm still interested.
How you come across? Have you subscribed them on Spotify, or how do you know that they exist?
I think shorts on YouTube probably, where I hear like one point and I say, oh, that's interesting, I'm going to listen into that podcast. Whoever it is, I don't even know the people who are the guests there sometimes. But when they say something interesting, it doesn't matter for me who they are or if they know them. If they say something interesting, I'm going to listen to it, right? And if it's good advice, even better. But I think I came across through random different related interests, For example, as I said, Stephen Bartlett, I think I only know him because I wanted to hear what Gary Neville has to say about his life and how he proceeded after his football career. It was just because I'm a Manchester United fan. I wanted to hear from Gary Neville, and then I started to hear that to know Stephen Bartlett better. And I thought, okay, this guy's also interesting. And then I came across his podcast, and now I'm subscribed to it, on YouTube, for example. Yeah, so that's how it happened for me.
Also, okay, you use like YouTube as a way to get to know those.
YouTube is definitely my media platform.
Yeah.
for everything, really for everything. I'm a very heavy YouTube user, I'd say.
How do you deal with those? There's a lot of shorts right now on YouTube, and sometimes I fell into that trap too, because the algorithm is pretty good right now and captures pretty easily your attention, or at least sometimes it happens. And how do you deal with that? Because whenever I go back to strictly saying, hey, I'm not allowed to consume any short form content, I feel way better. I'm less impulsive. I'm more focused. How do you deal with that to not go that rabbit hole and you doom scroll, basically?
To be honest, I'm not a fan of the YouTube Shorts at all. I was really unhappy when they introduced it. I just thought, oh my God, this is gonna be like Instagram now, you know. But I'm not sure if my algorithm somehow managed to avoid it. I'm not even sure if I get YouTube Shorts recommended. I'm not sure if that happens at all. Or maybe I'm so good at ignoring them that I can't remember it. But I'm really not affected by it, to be honest. I just scroll through my videos, and I have my channels that I'm subscribed to, and as soon as they drop a new video, I'm gonna watch it, and that's it. I mean, of course, I think it's still good. The shorts are good, to have a snippet of something that is going to be interesting, like, for example, a podcast. An episode is coming out in a few days, and then you have a YouTube short that shows you some interesting points or conversational points that happened during the podcast, and I think that's good for that. I'm actually happy with the shorts when it comes to that purpose, but otherwise, no, not really. And I don't come across them too often, I think.
Yeah, I asked that question because sometimes on the home screen you see them, and you find it interesting. Oh, I don't know, whatever you see there.
Yeah.
Whereas if I recently actually remembered, I actually have like a follower inbox where I get the recent uploads of the people I actually follow.
Yeah.
I thought like, fucking hell, why? Because you are so focused on the home screen sometimes, because the algorithm gives you exactly what you want.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, because you this is crazy. When I think about it, I'm actually, now that you say it, I'm controlled by the algorithm. It's not that I'm going on YouTube and actively searching for a video that I want to watch because I have a notification bell that says a new episode is out. No, it's just what is on the home screen. You're right. It's hard to avoid that, to be honest. But I think I'm so happy with my algorithm. I always say if that thing gets deleted somehow, I'm done. I'm done with anything, with media, with everything, because I couldn't recreate that anymore. It's just a perfect algorithm, and that's probably why I'm just allowing it to control my consumption of media, I guess, because it's just it's just perfect. I don't know how to describe it. Good job, YouTube, by the way.
Without YouTube, you would be like Aluhut.
Yeah, definitely. Tinfoil hat guy. No, I mean,
just good.
I was fun. Of course. I'm really prone to alternative paths and stories, and I love the content on YouTube. As soon as I see, I don't know if you know him, maybe you know him. I think his channel is named Johnny Harris. I think that's his real name, Johnny Harris. Does that ring a bell?
No.
Okay, he's just making content. I'd say geopolitical content, and I'm very, very prone to that type of content. I just love when people, think differently about what happened in history and how we can analyze that from different perspectives. I love that, and many people in my. Many of my friends like to call me the tinfoil hat guy because I just always come up with a different story, and I wouldn't say conspiracy theorist. I don't like that word at all, because not everything is a conspiracy. It's just analyzing and looking for evidence for something else maybe. And they're definitely dumb conspiracy theories, but I really like that content. I really love content where it's geopolitical, especially. I love that.
Yeah, and I think right now, especially since I think recently also with Trump being again in the White House and Mark Zuckerberg or other guys are again becoming a little bit more free speech, and because now it's again the time. For whatever reason they are doing that, but they are doing it. And I think maybe also Elon Musk buying Twitter and opening up to more diverse conversations is also maybe something that contributed. And
yeah. I mean, even before that, I never stopped looking at this type of content. No one could stop me doing that. Even it doesn't matter how if anything is censored or not, you can find your stuff if you want to, right? So this is something I'm actively seeking, actually. So this is the type of content that I'm looking for, I don't need my algorithm to give me some suggestions. I can find that myself.
What does your algorithm look right now? Because in my case it's mainly I get some self-improvement stuff, some business stuff, and then some conservative people bashing woke people sometimes. That's all sometimes super fun. Like, not in a... And I still believe like it's important to watch all different kind of perspectives, but it has a huge stimulation possibility to watch such content when the arguments are so flawed and somebody tells them just the facts without actually like really doing anything. That just like, okay, that's what people observed, and
definitely
just asking question, and I find that sometimes really stimulating. So I don't know how your I think that's a good summary of my algorithm. Maybe I'm missing something, but
it's the same. For me it's the same. It's just geopolitical analysis stuff, and then very much sports stuff, because I'm into sports, mainly basketball. And then what do we have? Podcasts, Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman, these type of podcasts, and of course, very conservative people making fun of not conservative people when it comes to very dumb ideas. But I'm trying. To be honest, I'm trying, even though I am conservative. I, as a person, everyone who knows me knows I'm conservative. There's no way around that. But I wouldn't call myself too much someone that is definitely on the right. It just happens that in today's day and age, being conservative is linked to being right, because the center was moved too much to the left in recent years. I probably a neutral person in today's age would consider me someone who is on the right spectrum of politics, but I wouldn't call myself that. I see myself very centered when it comes to that, and I also try to avoid avoid to consume too much of the very certainly right conservative people, even though I mostly agree with what they say. I just don't want to get biased, I try not to get biased, and I always try to also listen to the other side, which gets very difficult. Especially the left side is very difficult for me to consume, but I'm really forcing myself just to stay in the middle, because that is how I want to be politically oriented. But I love. It's very easy to fall in love with a little bash. From a conservative, happens is also in my algorithm, definitely.
I think you just said something interesting in terms of consuming conservative content, because I feel like if I'm consuming too much of what's going on, the news, and like there's a lot of ugly things happening out there, and I feel like if you consume all day long that type of content, I don't feel that calm. Let's put it like that.
Definitely,
because there's so much things going on where it's so detached from the reality. I feel sometimes, in my world, there's not happening that much what's going on the internet in terms of like right-wing people against left-wing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We are having a super conversation. I don't know. I don't see it in the real world, at least not that much. Maybe I'm not in those environments.
You build unnecessary rage while watching these videos.
That's it.
For no reason.
And I feel concerned about stuff, and then I think like I again need to cut that out of my life because I want to talk before about news, because a few years ago I said here on this podcast I don't consume any news, and because part of the reason is if there's something important going on, other people will tell me about it, and secondly, if I'm reading books or listening to long-form content like podcasts, I very much know what's going on because I understand why people behave in a certain way. For example, during the Corona time, how people behaved. I think, at least I would make the argument, if you understand the human psyche or the psychology of human behavior, you can understand why certain reactions occurred and certain reactions didn't occur. So it gives me a better understanding what's going on in the world by understanding the human mind, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
But right now, I have this. I don't have any, let's say, those cheap, shallow news applications on my phone any very long time already. I'm not consuming that news. It's just through, mainly I'm getting my news, if we want to talk about that, it's podcasts perhaps. Like if they talk about self-improvement, maybe they cover a little bit news because something's going on and it's interesting, like maybe a Jordan Peterson or a Lex Friedman more frequently talk about those topics. But then you see those short form, those YouTube reels where maybe a Charlie Kirk, which I found an interesting guy. I recently listened to his podcast with Jordan Peterson. He basically built up this huge young conservative community in the US. I think, how was it called? I forgot the name. But basically, like that short from what you get from him, like about, you see like him debating a left-wing guy. It's interesting. It's stimulating to watch. But for my own well-being, although I found it stimulating and to a certain degree with some things I agree what he's saying, if I consume all day long, I don't feel very calm. And it's like you said, it creates an artificial rage in my life that doesn't need to be there.
Absolutely. Especially... this is just, I don't know if that's your opinion too, but it's definitely my opinion. I somehow cannot take the political and social landscape of the US too serious myself, because it just sometimes it just looks like a caricature of life, what they are doing down there. It just feels surreal what they are talking about and how they behave. It's so distant to my life here in Switzerland and in Europe that I just, I have to wind back and say, whoa, I don't have these problems that these people are having. And when I consume, like you said, Charlie Kirk or some conservative debating on a uni campus and everything like that, it's very stimulating to watch. You're absolutely right, but I just sometimes have to go back into myself and say, whoa, these are really not my problems actually that I have here. And I have to be careful how much I consume of that and how much I take these ideas into my own conservatism, because they are concerned with topics that are absolutely not of any essence for us, I cannot really take a side sometimes, because when I am conservative, but if a conservative in the US talks about guns, I'm like absolutely
so detached from our reality.
This is so not it just doesn't make sense for me how they see certain things. Even it doesn't matter if we're right or left. It's just, what are they talking about? How is that even an issue? How is that even a point to be discussed publicly? How is that not just common sense? Certain things that they talk about, and I just try to detach myself at the end of the day and say, hey, look, this is their world, and they can do as they wish. But I just have to focus on what is happening here in Europe and what is happening in Switzerland for now. And this is also the reason why when the elections in the US are going on, many people all around the world talk about this because it's very important who is going to be the leader of the free world, right? But every time when this happens, my personal decision on who I would support is just based on what are they going to do geopolitically and outside of the US. This is what concerns me, because this is directly affecting me and my life. What they are going to do internally with the states and what states can say and what is on a federal level and everything, I don't care about that. I don't care about their laws. I don't care about what they're going to do with guns and everything. I really don't care what the president is going in with in these elections. It's just, for me, it's important. Are they going to be a warmonger? Yes or no? If no, I'm going to probably support them. Am I going to are my investment portfolio is going to drop because of that person? Yes, I wouldn't vote for that. I'm not supporting that guy. That's just how I look at it. I'm just really very, let's say, egotistical when it comes to US American stuff, and I just try to detach myself as good as I can, if you understand where I'm coming from.
Professor Carl Newport was once asked on his podcast about, like, what's your, and I'm paraphrasing, what's your opinion, your take on those woke left things that are going on in the world, diversity and so on? And he answered it pretty more high level, less picking sides. I like that answer. He more said, like, a lot of it is going on in the internet and not in the real world. That was the main takeaway. What we before concluded.
Yeah,
I think that's very much it, because the internet. I would make the argument, young people, their reality is is online. That's their reality.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't see that as, let's say, the real world where we have human interactions. Maybe to a certain degree it's still the real world because we spend a lot of time on our computers, etc. But specifically on social media, if you consume all day long that content, and the algorithm is pretty good at that, if it sees, hey, you're consuming all day long, let's say woke people getting bashed by conservatives, it gives you more of that, and you think like the world is constructed like this, but it isn't.
It's crazy.
Or not like you think it is. And hence, I try to then consume more long-form content. Like, for give you a specific example, when I want to get more informed about conservatives, lefts, and so on. Yeah. Like Jordan Peterson recently uploaded over an hour long podcast about the struggle Harvard is having with Trump, and seeing that from that perspective I found very interesting. It was over an hour, and now I know more about it. However, if I just consume 60 seconds, it was you get left like with this empty room. You don't know more, you don't know left. You just have perhaps this artificial aggression that's created within you, and that's not very. That doesn't lay any fertile ground for a fruitful conversation or debate.
Absolutely.
It's more than about who's right and who's wrong, but I think the goal should be, at least from my point of view, in a debate you should pursue the truth. That should be to approximate the truth, let's put it like that, to come as close as possible to the truth and not to win. And it's sometimes hard because you try to win. And also Charlie Kirk and Peterson talked about that in their conversation, because he was asked, I think, similar question, like, do you want to win? And long story short, like, a lot of things is happening in the internet. And I think another thing we talked before about was then also consuming content on the other side. But as you said, it's quite hard sometimes.
Yeah, it is hard.
And the reason for that is, I think the left have done a pretty bad job at going on to podcasts to talk about stuff. I haven't seen much left people to go on Joe Rogan, to go on Stephen Bartlett, to go on whatever kind of show. There are some instances, obviously, but it's not like if you see the conservatives, they are pretty vastly represented on self-improvement and general podcasts. Like Modern Risen, Chris Williamson is covering them, Stephen Bartlett to a certain extent. Joe Rogan even had Trump. You can listen to a 3-hour Trump conversation, which I found super helpful.
I think this changed the game, by the way.
It made it, I wouldn't say change the game, it just made it manifested even more strongly that podcast is the medium that everybody, or a lot of people consume. And
nobody wants to consume legacy media to get educated in politics on what is happening in the elections. This is something, and I think probably Trump's kids had an influence on him for that matter. He went on different podcasts, very popular podcasts, and
Patrick Bet-David, Theo Wan, comedians, Joe Rogan.
Absolutely, and I think he was I can't imagine that Trump had this idea himself. I think it's his kids who said, "Hey, this is a big step towards you winning the election if winning is a goal for them." And I think that was definitely a goal, of course. I think it changed the game how political candidacy and debates are gonna go going forward. It's a completely new game if you as a politician are able to have a conversation with someone in a 3-hour format where they're going to ask you political questions and you have to answer them. There's no cutting, there's no pre-written text, there's nothing. You have to know your stuff, right? To go on a podcast and talk about your stances, your political stances. And I think this is, even though in this case it is Donald Trump, it shows that you're confident in your values, right? And that you can defend them in a real conversation. And this signal is something that I think the voters, consumed somehow. And they knew, okay, this guy, he can defend his stances in a podcast and talk with people about it. I didn't see Kamala, for example, doing that. And that's probably why he won, I think. I think that changed the narrative very much, or at least the outcome of the elections. I think that was very influential that he went on podcasts and got a young audience, an additional young audience as voters, I think.
I think you can't really hide for 3 hours being on Joe Rogan to be an asshole or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
That's the point. And I think that's the reason why, at least, or not implying that every left is an asshole. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that I'm saying that certainly in most cases after an hour you know more or less are the arguments of that person solid or flawed. Mm-hmm. No one can hide being or a bad, let's put it bluntly, a bad person for more than an hour. People have sensors, and they can smell if somebody's pretending something or not telling the truth.
Absolutely.
And I would really hope that some solid left people would go more on those podcasts, because then you and I get more of the content we are seeking, because we want a diverse perspective in terms of not only want the conservatives, but right now the conservatives pretty prevalent on podcasts. Yeah. We also want to listen another perspective and say, but there is not much coming.
No.
And when and that's also maybe a little bit distraught. I recently saw a podcast from a very, very left person, and
what's the name of the person?
I forgot the name.
Okay.
She's obese. That's what I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And she had a 2-hour conversation with Konstantin something. I forgot his name. He's the Russian guy.
Yeah, I think I know. Yeah.
I listened. I couldn't really listen to that because.
Kisin.
Yeah, I think something like that.
Yeah.
And I listened to that conversation. I feel that's again that it's hard to listen. Listen to arguments that are so detached from an average person that's walking out there outside that believes like, hey, I have a wife or I have a husband and like children and that doesn't speak like it has very little to do with reality sometimes.
Can't
I'm not
identify
saying
with
all,
it
but
at all. Yeah.
that's so hard to listen to. And I would really love to see someone on the left who maybe has some more compelling arguments, because right now I'm not really compelled by these arguments.
Yeah,
That they are bringing up that there are, I don't know, 1,000 genders and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's a pity. It's a pity. There definitely should be more, because just for me, for myself, I really want to diversify my sources of information. You know, I don't want to, you know, as you said, go down the rabbit hole and just really fall into that line of conservative media that is always gonna, you know, reinforce my previous thoughts. You know, that's just not how I want to think. It's just not how I want to be. I really want to have a diversified sources for my opinion, and they have to be of quality, of course. And for now, the conservative sphere, let's say, produces more quality sources for me at the moment. But I'm still trying to. I'm of course still trying to, you know, also look at the other side. But it's difficult, as you said. It's really difficult. Yeah.
Something I've observed recently is the resurgence of conservative movements across countries. Italy, Germany, of course the US now with Trump. And to be honest, to a certain degree, I also welcome this shift. I think we've just come out of a fairly long stretch where the political left, at least in many places, has been dominant. But the ideology it has often pushed during that time hasn't always seemed conducive to freedom or social cohesion. By the way, I wrote that down to prepare for this podcast.
All right.
Now, I'm not saying conservatives have all the answers, but what I'm hoping for, and what I think is essential for any healthy society, is that the left regains its footing and becomes a strong, thoughtful counterparty again. We need a robust debate. Every good idea should be tested. Every movement needs a worthy challenger to sharpen its arguments and avoid extremes. And at the moment, I don't feel that level of balance or intellectual sparring is quite there. And I think we are all worse off because of that. Or at least it is not really conducive to anything or to most things. And I'm saying that, and I'm saying that as someone who doesn't identify with anything of any ideology. I wouldn't consider myself someone on the left or someone on the right or conservative or someone. I don't subscribe to any doctrine or ideology, and I think you don't do that when you say you're. I think you are also pretty sophisticated in your thoughts. That's not what I'm implying, but I've just realized that, you know, that's what I learned from Jordan Peterson. Like ideologies are not good, and why they are not good, and I'm trying to give you the gist, is an ideology tries to give you an answer for everything. And something that tries to give an answer for everything is not very sophisticated, because the planet, the world is way more complex than a single ideology that can give you answers to everything in life.
I absolutely agree.
And that's the reason, that's my struggle with, like, I can't see myself on any side, you know. I just try to, because I have some conservative beliefs. I have some maybe beliefs that are in the middle and some on the left. Although right now I'm more compelled by let's say conservative arguments out there. And I just would wish, or I very much, and what I'm saying with that, I very much hope that right now, where the conservatives are getting stronger again, that the left get their act together and build a solid counterparty, a solid sparring partner that tests and challenges what the conservatives are doing. Because I feel like I remember a Swiss editor-in-chief of Weltwoche, Roger Köppel. He said something like, when the boat is leaning towards the left, it needs to go again a little bit more on the right, and if it goes too far in the right direction, again on the other side. But right now, at least what I feel, and I'm not an expert, I'm not really deep into that, that's just a bro science theory. I just feel like the left don't really have their act together because they subscribe to so many different ideas that are so far from reality.
Mm-hmm.
To give you an example, like this whole transgender issue, or that or diversity stuff, that diversity is more important than merit, like competence. And just to say, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have respect for people. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying, like, they subscribe to things that doesn't apply to most people, and it's good to, to support someone who doesn't have the same opportunity. But I think in most cases it's more they don't want opportunity of outcome. They don't want the same opportunity for everybody, like in terms of that everybody who has hard circumstances can do something. They want
which would be something desirable. Right?
Yeah, they want more like that the same outcome occurs everywhere. But this is hardly possible if you have people who are more competent than others.
Absolutely.
It's a pretty obvious, at least from my perspective, very obvious. But
I'm definitely agreeing on that one. We really need a good competitor for the right. Not, I wouldn't say wing, but just politics on the right. We need a good competitor for them, someone with good arguments, and I think now. By the way, you mentioned who did you quote? Roger Köppel.
Yeah, right.
If you remember, we went on a dinner, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, and we talked about that topic with some friend of ours. And I remember me saying, I feel like it's a pendulum that swings, and nowadays it's on the left side, and you can see the extremes on the right side trying to pull it back into the middle, right? And I think that's basically the same what Roger was saying. I think that maybe 30 years ago or something, people were very right and conservative, I think, for almost the whole human mankind histories up until maybe the 90s or something. And because this culminated into an extreme, I guess, the left have taken over and started to bring the pendulum back into the middle, right? And now they overswung, and it went into a direction where top fringe topics that nobody actually experiences, or a very, very small percentage of the people experience, are getting discussed in a manner as if it's the most important thing in the world. And that's why the pendulum is swinging back right now. And I just hope that I can stay in the middle throughout all of these swings. That's what I'm trying to achieve.
Well, by the way, can you explain that a little bit? I think I understood it correctly.
Yeah.
But, like, so you described yourself as a conservative, but see yourself on the middle, so just that folks can follow or understand that. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, of course. I define conservative as someone who has traditional values, traditional in the sense of, okay, let's go further back. I have an Orthodox Christian background, Serbian background. It is probably known that the people there are still, leaning towards traditional values and everything. You've made your own experiences there, of course, and that's what I call conservative. So I'm definitely family oriented. I want to have a big family. I think the roles, the gender roles still apply to a certain extent in a modern and fair way, of course. But I believe in that. I think it is beautiful that women and men are different, and it should be that way. And we should feel free to take on these roles and be what we think we should be. That's what I think is conservative. That's why I call myself conservative. But this is, all these points don't necessarily are linked to political stances. There are just some. The problem is that these values that I have, which are conservative, are being challenged by a very extreme left at the moment, which is why I myself am leaning towards right politics, right? but it doesn't mean that I'm actually fully in accord with what the people on the right are saying. Because, for example, right means right is very often also xenophobia, right? And
What does that mean?
Sorry. If I'm not mistaken, that means that you are phobia from something that is different or stranger to you. You know, so everything that is different than you are. I think that's xenophobia. If I'm not, can you Google it? Maybe I don't want to spread false infos. So you are just against, for example, immigrants and everything. So immigration is a big topic and everything. And if I look at it that way, so if I call myself conservative and people consider me to be a right-wing person, let's say, many of the right-wing people and politicians actually wouldn't be happy for me being in their team, you know, because they don't want me either. And that's why I say I'm in the middle. They're just common sense is what drives my political opinion. My values are the same, no matter what the political spectrum is. My values are going to stay the same. And if some on that side of the spectrum attacks these values and some and on the other side of the spectrum doesn't attack these values, then I'm going to lean towards the right, for example, in that case. If there are some other things that are going to be attacked by the right side, which are incorporated in my values, I'm going to be against them. And I think if you take all my values together and how I think, I just think I'm in the middle. That's why I wouldn't say I'm on the right side. But I'm conservative. That stands. I think conservative just means that you conserve values that were before, right? So you conserve something that was before and don't...
You execute proven functioning processes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think our family... our family-driven values and roles and everything, they have proven to be quite successful because, all our ancestors did it and it worked quite well, I think. So, yeah, I'm conservative, but I wouldn't say I'm right-wing. I'm just leaning more towards right politics at the moment because the left is too extreme for me and is attacking my values, my traditional conservative values. And that's probably the reason why every conservative is considered right now, because that's just happening. That's just how it is at the moment. But I'd love to be in the middle.
I think 20, maybe, and I'm speculating here.
Mm-hmm.
I presume 20, 30, 40 years ago, what you just said would have just been, that's common sense and that's just in the middle.
Absolutely.
And I think it still is because,
that shouldn't have changed.
Just recently, I was, my mother and I, we went together to buy groceries.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw there women I went together with in kindergarten. Mm-hmm. She had 2 kids already.
All right.
I found it's pretty beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then just thinking here in Switzerland, going through the grocery store, I thought how peaceful it is.
Mm-hmm.
Here still stuff is going on normally, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Here die Welt ist noch in Ordnung. The world is still in order.
Yeah.
We say in German. And it's interesting where things have gone. And there is, I quickly want to share with you a recent quote I came across. Let me share that with you. Yeah, here it is. The next time some academics tell you how important diversity is, ask how many conservatives there are in their sociology department. That's Thomas Sowell who said that. Who's, by the way, black. I think that's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
And
I like him.
Yeah,
he's a great guy.
Why I just brought that up is, I did talk about some topics that are to a certain degree important,
Mm-hmm.
Who wouldn't want different perspectives on anything?
Yeah.
But it went a little bit too far, and it is so far detached from reality. As I just mentioned this example, I'm going through the grocery store, and I think the vast majority of people here in this grocery store doesn't really agree with that what they put out there, and they really agree with extreme stuff on the right or on the left. You know, just
absolutely.
I think that's perhaps 80% of people. They are not like left hardliners or right hardliners. They're just like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I have some conservative views, some progressive views, and yeah, I can't pick really one side. And it's just like right now we see those extremes, and maybe those extremes are existing to a certain degree in those bubbles online. Maybe
Definitely.
we see them on those rallies or demonstrations out there where a very, very concentrated folks or very concentrated ideology prone people meet and they demonstrate for something, and then you see those scenes where violence occurs. But I think that's not the average. And
no, definitely not.
maybe something on a maybe two things I want to cover. One thing is, I find it actually beautiful because I would say we agree on that fully, and that
absolutely.
I'm totally on your side. Common sense stuff. That we are, I think, on the same page there, and I think it's important to see different perspective. Obviously, it's sometimes hard because you get so much content from one side, or at least not only content from that side, just like quality content, and it happens to be more, let's say, traditional stuff, which is actually in the middle, you know, and that's interesting. You know, I had this quote. Maybe here it is. I recently posted on X the following, and I got that from Pearson in his book. He wrote something about that in Beyond Orders. In an organization, assign conservatives to execute proven functioning processes. Assign the more progressive or creative types to improve those processes, bringing in novelty, new ideas, and better ways of doing things. And that maybe brings our conversation just on a brings in a different perspective, using actually that tendency that people are inclined towards certain sides, a little bit more progressive, a little bit more conservative, took organizations advantage by saying, okay, somebody who likes proven processes and executing systems is perhaps a great operator, a chief operating officer who can execute what the CEO at the top said, this is what we need to do. And then he brings, there's where the rubber meets the road, and we put things into practice, and he pays attention that everything is executed rightly. Whereas someone who has more on the personality traits, let's say new ideas, is more open-minded, maybe higher in neuroticism, they are great maybe for bringing in new ideas, improving stuff, you know. To a certain degree, a CEO needs also to master that balance. On the one hand side, they have like a cash cow, a fancy word for a proven business model where they can make money. So they need to focus maybe 70% of their time on that. And then 20% of their time, they go maybe in adjacent markets. So markets where they can explore maybe something new, but still somehow related to the core business model. And then the last 10%, that's the novelty. We are going into completely new, different fields. We've never done that before. And I think that's an interest, and that's just a framework that's out there, how to do business. And I think, again, also CEO needs to balance, like, we do proven things, and we also need to be open-minded. Otherwise, you end up there's this camera company that went bankrupt. How's it called? Kodak?
Kodak,
That's a famous example. Every university professor, you know, Kodak. That if you stand still, that will happen with you. You will go bankrupt if you don't innovate your business model.
Absolutely.
And I think there's this nuance between, okay, you need to innovate your business model, obviously, but also to execute proven processes. And right now, at the moment, I feel a lot of people talk about doing everything new, but I think a lot of people are actually misguided if they would do always new. Because, give you an example, what I've learned from Alex Ramosi is that if you go from 0 to perhaps $1 million in revenue annually, and this applies to, I think, a lot of business out there, you do service business, let's say coaching. You have one product, So one major product you sell, maybe a video course with some community and coaching calls. One acquisition channel, so maybe you acquire your customers through Instagram or calls or cold emails or warm DMs, whatever. One channel you focus on, and then one target group, one target customer. So you clearly define, okay, I focus on mothers over 30 years old having at least one child and are vegan.
Okay. Wow. Very specific, but yeah.
Very specific, okay. Yeah. You focus on that. And I think that focus helps you to better understand the pain points, because you can't help everybody. You need to focus on a few, on a specific target group to understand perfectly well their pain points.
Yeah.
Long story short, what I'm saying is, right now we see this shift towards new, but I think there's a balance to it. That's what I'm trying to
I think
say.
that is real diversity.
That's real diversity.
Real diversity is having the best of both worlds, right? So you cannot just you cannot just search for innovation all the time, because you need the financial stability through conservatism, to generate the profits that you can then use to, allocate to different new ideas and people who are out of the box thinkers and everything. You need the conservative types as much as you need the innovator types and the progressive types, definitely. And this applies to politics, this applies to businesses. I think this applies to everywhere in life. Even internally in yourself, you need your conservative side and you need your progressive and innovative side. Everyone needs that. Any business, any person, any family, everything, every construct, every social construct, everything.
I think that supports also what I said in the first place, that I don't subscribe to any ideology, and that I feel not confident being on one side, like that. I don't speak over myself. Yeah. I'm a conservative or a progressive, because I feel always, and I've considered, by the way, just recently, I really thought about, should I really, for instance, join the Swiss party, Swiss people group?
Yeah, Swiss people, yeah. Swiss.
Because I thought about, it's going too much in one direction. And then I thought, okay, but there I also don't feel very, I don't see myself there feeling comfortable with all those conservatives, because I have very progressive things. For instance, the fact that I joined soon a startup, or that I've started my own business, or that I started this podcast, shows that in my personality traits, I'm pretty high, or to some degree, in openness. And open people tend to lean towards the left side.
Yeah.
So again, it's always nuance to it, and therefore I very fast discarded that thought again, because I thought that's just why I'm having that thought. It's just because I saw too many conservatives bashing woke people, seeing woke people arguing for stuff that's so far from reality doesn't make any sense.
Definitely.
Can you follow?
Absolutely.
What I'm saying?
I just want to say to that point, I absolutely agree with you. But for example, my voting habits, the party you just mentioned is the party I voted the most for in recent years, because I'm trying to row back the boat into the middle, So when the world is leaning left, I even though I'm not agreeing on everything, it's the lesser evil in my opinion.
That's a good way how to put it.
Yeah, it's a lesser evil. Nothing is perfect, right? You have to make your own party to actually completely, represent whatever your ideas are. You cannot find that in one single party. That's just not possible. So I'm just trying to steer the politics with my voting into the middle again. So really, I really mean that. If one day our politics are too far on the right, I would do exactly the same and would vote for the absolutely most leftist party there is, just to bring back common sense. I just want common sense and the truth, by the way. So I think common sense and truth should be is something that works together somehow. It's just that's how I think about it.
And quick side note here:
Yeah.
this party in question, the Swiss People Party, is on a, let's say, on a on a pendulum, conservative, but not. There are more extremes options out there. I think.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's not I wouldn't consider that an extreme option. The Swiss Party people.
No.
The Swiss People Party.
Yeah.
It's not. It's still in the spectrum of, like, because if I look on the other side, I feel sometimes there are way more extremists or radical people. Quite frankly.
Absolutely. So I mean, 1 or 2 years ago, you couldn't even say that in public without being bashed. For even in Switzerland, especially in Basel and the regions there, this is like a little bit of a taboo. But for me, it's not. I'm very open about that because that's just how I think. I'm just always trying to steer the politics into the right direction. If it's too right, I'm gonna vote left. If it's too left, I'm gonna vote right. Just to bring it back into the common sense middle ground area where I feel the world should be and the political stances should be.
Yeah, I think 2 important things you mentioned. So, like, suppressing stuff that we are discussing, or suppressing any free speech in sense of, or most of it, it's not really helpful, because if people speak, it's a way of thinking. Right now we are having a conversation and we have some ideas in our mind, and maybe they are completely flawed, but we try to make any sense of them and to articulate and say them in a conversation.
Absolutely.
And maybe it doesn't make sense, and maybe you correct me and say, got you had a mistake in your argumentation. But that's, I think, really important, that people feel free to express what they think, because if they don't do it, they, to a certain degree, start to lie or deceive themselves or betray themselves, and that's what you don't want. Because if the entire society is based on a huge lies, we have seen that in totalitarian regimes. Terrible things, to say the least, starting to happen. Terrible atrocities, and I think that's something that the history taught us, that people should speak to each other in a respectful, constructive manner to approximate the truth. We circling back to what we initially said about having a debate. To not win, that shouldn't be the goal. To approximate the truth. And the truth can be hard, and it can hurt your feelings, but that's how it works.
Absolutely. I think there's a very important distinction. Common sense can move through the ages and how people think, but the truth is only one truth. There's no subjective truth. There's no my truth. There's no their truth. There's nothing like that. It's just the truth. And common sense, I hope, my ideal is that common sense is somewhere around the truth, or as approximative to the truth as is possible. Sometimes it is just not. But this can change, and we can politically influence how common sense changes, and this has happened over time, right? But the truth is just the truth. That's something you cannot change, and my goal is to approximate the truth, definitely.
Peterson, I'm often referencing to him because he was one of the online mentors I had. I don't know, obviously, him personally, but his contents very much helped me to improve my life. And he has this rule of speak the truth, or at least don't lie. Speak the truth, obviously, but why not? Why saying, or at least don't lie? Because sometimes it's quite hard to know what is actually the truth. But at least speaking what you think is already a good starting point, I presume. And he also talks about that if you happen to see something and you know you could contribute something that would help that situation, and you're shutting up, that's also to a certain degree lying. That's how I understood it. Because you're not standing up in that moment, although you knew you should stand up right now because someone else is perhaps lying. And that very, very much helped me, because speaking the truth is kind of scary. Right now, what we are doing, talking about stuff so openly, that's perhaps the first time I'm doing that on so deep. But I think like that we are having an adventure and we are true to ourselves.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like people can smell that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's not what people want. People want people in front of them that can stand up and speak their truth.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the truth, their truth, or
Yeah.
what they think. Another aspect you mentioned before is...
Can I just
please,
say something? I think what Peterson said there is an old ode to authenticity, because you want to say the truth, or at least what you think is the truth, and really stand behind that. So when people have different interpretations of what the truth is, then there's a discourse, and this will lead to resolving what the actual truth is, right? But if you deliberately lie, you're manipulating and you're not authentic. And I think that's how I would interpret it. That is also what you said. I just wanted to reinforce that. That's how I see it. You want to be authentic, and being authentic means that you really believe in something and you're standing behind that. So even if you're, I don't know, on the absolute left or on the absolute right, and you're just convinced that something is as you think it is, you're going to say that and you should, because that's what you really think. You're authentic, and you're not lying. You're not deliberately lying. You're saying whatever you think is really the truth. And if it's not the case, and two people talk with each other and they have different opinions, but they both think they're saying the truth, then discourse happens and discussions and real debates. And that's what I think is what always has to be the goal. You cannot censor anyone just because you think that what they're saying is not right or not fair or whatever, because being in a discussion just leads to the real truth. And that's what being in the middle is, I think. Listening to both sides, right? And seeing for yourself, okay, now I know. The truth is somewhere in the middle. If this camp says this and this camp says that. I just, I went off a little bit on that one, but I think you understand what I mean.
I very much love you solidifying this point. Naval Ravikant, the founder of AngelList, has this quote: "No one can compete with you in being you."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I very much love that.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason is there's only one version of you, and by telling the truth or saying telling what you think, you come closer to that. You're authentic, and everybody talks about authenticity, but how can we operationalize that? How can we put that into practice? What does it actually mean? And I think a good way how to start becoming more authentic is say what you think, and don't be a coward.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
And I remember Andrew Huberman, the famous neuroscientist, professor, had Jordan Peterson on his show. And the first time he talked about perhaps some political stuff to a certain degree, stuff he never had really covered on his podcast. Mm-hmm. And I think for him it was kind of scary, but Jordan Peterson then talked about or shared something like, let's have this, like we are having now, this is an adventure. Mm-hmm. If you tell the truth, if you say what you think, you're starting having an adventure. Yeah. And the reason why it's scary is because you don't know what happens afterward. Yeah. Maybe this podcast, Huberman sharing some beliefs he has, could go viral and end his career. Mm-hmm. But he's still true to himself. And I think long-term wise, that's always, at least for what I've experienced, or I feel better at least, short, mid, and long-term wise, to be more true to yourself, to not betray yourself or deceive yourself.
Definitely. I also think that people who are authentic are just more respected generally. You will always, even though if you don't agree with someone, when you know this person is authentic, you're just going to respect them more. You can say, oh, I'm absolutely not okay with what this guy is saying, but at least he's true to himself. He's sticking up for his values or his whatever it is. And that's much more respectable than someone who deliberetely lies or manipulates or is not true to himself. It seems cowardly. You can feel it. You can. Let's say people who have a little bit of interpersonal skills, I'd say, can sense when someone is not authentic, and that just, you lose the respect for people like that. Do you feel me?
Totally.
Yeah, that's
People have very good sensors.
Mm-hmm.
They can smell it.
Yeah, absolutely.
A long time ago, I actually said 2 takeaways I had, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
First one being talking helps because people think. Talking is a way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And the second, what I got to know or learn from you is people are choosing the lesser evil, you know, and I like that. It's a great experience. It's like, it reminds me a little bit, some people will maybe describe it like that, when Trump was first elected and people had the choice between Hillary Clinton or Trump. People chose the lesser evil.
I see. Yeah.
Although I not entirely wouldn't agree with that, because I see some value what Trump is doing.
Yeah.
It's just like a cool way how to put it. And in some ways it's very much, I think it's true. Yeah, you see that people, I recently talked to a very, or not recently, past two-ish years, talked to a close family member, and you would think of him, he's more conservative. But when talking to him a little bit deeply, you see this person is kind of open-minded, has maybe some traditional values. But I'll give you an example. He ran a business for many years, 40 years maybe, and he employed a guy from Macedonia, or I think somewhere from the Balkan.
All right.
His name was Nenad. No, Jakub was his name. Jakub was his name.
Okay.
And I realized that I always thought he's more conservative, but he really don't care from where you are if you do good work. He said, like, Jakub was never late. He was always on time, and he did his things properly.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit where you are from.
Yeah.
You do your stuff good, because people sometimes put people in a certain, let's say, they put labels on other people's, although that's not true. And that is a great example for it. And in other instances as well, like, he ran a business. Alone this fact shows that he needs to be open-minded to a certain degree, and he needs to be willing to, let's say, and go in or have some risk in your life. Let's put it like that.
Definitely.
And it just was interesting to see.
I think they have this trait. You have to have this trait. You have to be open-minded, or just open to new and uncertain things and risky. You can't be risk averse and you can't be risk averse and being entrepreneur. You can't be that, and you can also not be risk averse when it comes to being open for immigrants and people from other cultures, right? Or being open to cultures. You can't be risk averse, because you risk losing your own sense of culture or how someone should behave, because you're open to receiving new inputs regarding behavior or values, whatever it is. So I think that is, you're absolutely right about that. When an entrepreneur, someone who is not that risk averse to open up a business and face all the risks that come with that, can't be too closed up when it comes to other people and different people from other countries. It just doesn't make sense. I see it the same way, and I think, like you said, most of the people are just actually in the middle, and in the middle for me means common sense, and common sense on the other hand means meritocracy. It's about merits. It's not about anything else. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter whatever it is. It's your business, and you want your business to flourish and to prosper and to be good, to make profits, whatever it is. And for that, you need efficient workers who are going to do their job, who are going to be in the right place, in the right time, and on time. And if that is given, it doesn't matter where you come from. I think every good or efficient entrepreneur should think like that, and probably thinks like that. I think every successful entrepreneur will probably think like that and just go on merits. Especially if your company is new and if you're starting up, there's no other way around it. You cannot implement these different things, the new things that are going around nowadays. You don't have you don't have the financial means for that.
I love what you said. I think there's this balance you see entrepreneurs, when someone gets into entrepreneurship, they start something new, but I think pretty fast they need to unlearn that doing something new, because now it's sticking to something for an extended period of time to attain success. Because just starting something new is exciting. You know that, maybe you know that. Yeah, I know it for sure. Like 4 weeks, you're super excited, and then the real world work begins.
Yeah.
And now do it again for the next 5 years. That's kind of hard. It's like with this podcast. The first 3 episodes, super, it's everything new. But now do it every week, every Monday, no matter what. Holidays, no holidays, do it again, do it again, do it again, get better. I think there's this balance, but I see your point definitely. Now, maybe quickly circling back to this close family member. I will not disclose who it is to protect him. It's also interesting. In his case, he sometimes may do a funny joke about on let's say on someone else, about someone else. He makes maybe an inappropriate joke, but I don't judge people by what they say. I judge them what they do.
Yeah.
That's all what matters. And I think, or largely what matters. And I think, again, now circling back to the political discussions, I see like in the political realm, sometimes people, they are exceptionally good speakers. They know how to make a point. They know how to persuade people, to convince people of certain things. And there are people out there that they're not that good at words or with words. And they're seen not good. But then if you watch but sometimes I feel like it's not more important, or I ask myself, it's not more important to see what has done this person or this party and what have done those folks. Words doesn't mean anything if there's no action behind words.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right about that one. It just depends. For me, me personally, I don't know why, I'm just a little bit sensitive to let's call it racism. I don't like when people are too tread too lightly with being offensive towards other races and people. That's just because I don't know. It feels inhumane to me to deliberately offend people just because there's something else. But jokes are jokes. There's so many. Why? I mean, if there's a stereotype about a certain nation or a certain race, whatever it is, embrace it, man. It's funny, There's a reason why there are stereotypes, and if there's a joke about it, it's just words. You're absolutely right. But there are people who make, like you said, we don't want to expose anyone, but the person you talked about made a joke, which is probably no problem at all, and very lightheartedly said, I guess. But their actions show that they're actually open to different cultures and different people, and I think, as you said, that's absolutely the case. Your actions speak more than your words, and words are not that important when it comes to your actions. If you have actions that definitely show that you're on the right side of things. But I'm just a little. I don't know if that's me, but I don't like this like hiding of actual racism through jokes. Oh, I'm just joking, but actually you're racist, I don't like that, because you're then not being authentic. You're trying to hide your racism through jokes, but you're actually a racist, and that's just some. Yeah, maybe I'm too sensitive for in that case, but that's just how I think. That's just how I think. There are many people, unfortunately, that are actually racist. They hide it through jokes, but when you talk to them in a private room where nobody can hear them, you can actually see that some people are really racist. It's crazy, and I don't like that. I don't like actual racism, but I like jokes. I love joking. I would take any joke about my my people, or Serbian or Swiss people or Basel people or whatever, or race is my race, whatever it is. I really like that. I love comedy, and I think anybody should be able to take a damn joke. I just don't like real racism hidden behind jokes. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah,
it's like, in his case,
this was not about your family.
No, not at all. I thought it interesting to think about that, because in his case, those were still some gentle jokes that are, let's say, if we have certain constraints, where making jokes is appropriate, I would say it's still in the appropriate manner. And I see what you mean. There is, you can go too far, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
And I totally agree with you. I can't smell that, to be honest, in sense of I'm actually pretty allergic to that. When I see injustice in high school, where some students were had certain perks that I could enjoy, or vice versa, like other people, they were treated not very nice. I stood up and it caused some troubles with some teachers. I always had that in me, and I totally agree with you. I would agree with that, quite sensitive to that. I'm just, why I brought that up, I think right now we see more like if someone who's making a gentle, appropriate, and in the end it's again the question of what's an appropriate joke. That's another discussion. But putting certain labels on people, and this person I was talking right now about, this person is a very upright, honest, truthful, hardworking person. And if someone you crack a joke on someone's cost, and it's just like, it's still a subtle joke.
Yeah.
People like nowadays, they're so sensitive on the, I'm not now referencing to you, you know what I mean.
Completely,
in terms of, they're so sensitive to any joke. And then I recently saw,
and I hate that even more. Not being able to make a simple, subtle joke, playing with prejudice a little bit. That's just what comedy is, and funny things. So, canceling of all the comedians and everything, I'm absolutely against it, and I hate it. I hated that this is going on, or was going on at least. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I love that you say that. That's how I see it. Everything what you talked, I fully agree. And I saw recently, how's this comedian called? Matt Rife?
Matt Rife.
Right?
I just recently saw some videos. Yeah.
He's pretty good at crowd work. So he does jokes while talking to his audience.
He reacts to circumstances in the crowd and just makes everyone laugh. He's a good one. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, and there was one person in the wheelchair. And that's always like...
Yeah, that's...
what are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
But he continued. And he did jokes about this person. And then, in the end, this person said something which I found remarkable. Paraphrasing, I love that you are making jokes also of people in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
You don't make a difference. And again, there's this, and I see your point of where you're coming from behind every joke, like lurks a little bit truth.
Yeah.
I don't know how far this is applicable, but I don't. That's another discussion. But making in general jokes, I think, because who defines what's an appropriate and inappropriate joke?
Absolutely.
Maybe the social confines or like the constraints will, but people will. If you attend an event and someone cracks a joke that is very inappropriate, people will let you feel. You will feel that way.
Absolutely, yeah.
And in my estimate, what I mentioned before about this person was appropriate in sense of it's still in the where you can do jokes and you should do jokes because we are not everybody like we are everybody emotional to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But if you can't make joke of anything, life is super dull. It doesn't mean to call someone out cursing on someone because they have a certain race. That's another thing. I detest that. It's
but especially
terrible.
if you can't laugh about yourself, it starts with that, because if you take yourself too seriously, you're never gonna laugh about the joke that someone says on your costs, you know. That's just not going to happen. You're always going to be the lame guy who says, oh, that was offensive or whatever. And I think the person in the wheelchair that you mentioned on Matt Rive's crowd work, this is exactly what this means. Because when you're in a wheelchair and everyone gets roasted except you, it means that someone is sorry for you, you know. And that's always going to be the feeling that you're going to have. Or if it's a specific race, if nobody's going to make a joke about Indians, for example, because, you know, maybe Indians are sensitive or something, you're always going to be that victim. You're seen from the whole society and from the comedian himself as a victim that cannot be touched, you know, because, and you're always going to feel isolated and separated that way, because it starts with you not being able to laugh at yourself and other people feeling sorry for you, right? But Matt Rife does that very well. He just roasts also the people in the wheelchair. And it's tough, you know. Of course, it's a taboo. Always people going, ooh, you know. It's a difficult one. You have to do it the right way, because it's very hard to, you know, laugh about someone who's in a wheelchair because of an accident or something. It's just not funny, actually, you know. But you can make it funny, and you can do a joke, and when you just have to read the room, right? And I think Matt Rife does that well. He knows how to read the room and where to stop and where to begin, and he successfully read that the person in the wheelchair was ready to have these kinds of jokes. It's great. I love that.
Yeah, and she telling him, "I love that you're doing that," was I found interesting.
Yeah, it's good. It's nice, actually.
Before you talked about this Indian example,
yeah, this is random, by the way.
Yeah,
it's random.
I think. Maybe I'm not, and this is just again bro science. Maybe I'm completely wrong.
I love bro science.
That actually not making jokes about certain people because they have a certain gender or sex. Don't want to call it gender anymore. That's call it sex.
I understand. Yeah.
Or a certain race or whatever. If you're not making jokes about them because they're a minority and you are scared of that. That's actually racist, because you're discriminating by race.
Yeah, you're discriminating by way of jokes. You're not including them into your jokes, and that is somehow indirectly racist, I guess.
That's what we don't want, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. That's exclusion.
Like,
it's direct exclusion. Yeah,
it's similar to that struck me about those quotas at university, for instance. Like, a lot of universities claim to be super diverse and equity, inclusion, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But then I see those quotas and I think like, I thought you don't want to discriminate by how you look and skin color, but you are exactly doing that right now.
Yeah.
And I think and I don't have the solution to those issues that certain people don't have the opportunity, but there are pretty sophisticated people out there that try to make an effort to find somebody, for instance, the Elon Musks out there that are maybe living in a third world country and don't have the opportunity to find those people and to connect them, to source them, or not to connect them with a potential employer.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But no, I think the solution is not quotas.
No.
It's especially because I give you an example. I talked to a Bain & Company strategy consultant. I think he works in. Earning good money, I presume. Pretty
just
smart.
Before
guy.
you give the example, I just want to say something quick.
Please, yeah.
Please keep in mind what you wanted to say. I really just before I forget what I wanted to say. I think what also happens with quotas is that you make the people that are negatively affected by it even more frustrated and actually reinforce the problem which brought you to bring the quotas. You know, so. If discrimination, for example, against women was a problem and you introduce quotas, let's say, hate or being miserable or being frustrated towards women is going to be increased through you introducing quotas, because people will feel discriminated on the other side. And I think it actually has the opposite effect and will never help. And no quota will ever help anywhere, you know. But yeah, that's. I just wanted to say that before you continue with the example.
Perfectly said, I believe.
Thank you.
Because this guy, so friend of mine, is pretty smart, strategy consultant at Bain and so on, and he told me about there are certain universities out there, and they have quotas into certain programs.
Yeah.
And what's ended up happening in that instance was they let certain people in just based on their whatever ethnicity, race, however you want to call it. And then later on, they struggled to find a job because they were not that qualified in the first place.
Yeah.
So it was way harder. So you let in, and that, I would make the argument, or perhaps this will decrease the standing of this master program, which is one of the best master programs in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that category. I was thinking, okay, what exactly do you want to achieve here? Like, okay, I think make an effort to find the best people across the globe, but not based on whatever sex, skin color, ethnicity.
Yeah.
Don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Look out for, don't care about any of those things, and look for the smartest people across the globe. And maybe you need to put in some more effort, but if that's what you're subscribed to this doctrine of saying, okay, diversity, you didn't do it actually.
Yeah.
Because that's artificially created, or to a large extent artificially created, and it's more than about like diversity over competence and merit, but it should be the other way around, I believe.
Yeah.
Like someone, and as you said, if you have someone, let's do a specific example. There is man and woman, a woman and a man. And woman is more competent, more skilled at the job. The woman should get the job.
Absolutely.
And the other way around if the man is more competent.
Yeah.
And maybe there are some biases. Obviously, there are some biases. That's how we go through life.
Yeah.
Every person out there has biases. And I would even, and that's one of my extreme stances, maybe some people would call it, every person is to a certain degree racist. Why? Let me explain. That's can cause a lot of troubles. If you walk down the street and you see a person that has pink color skin, and this person stabs you, and a few months later you recover, you walk again down that street and you see again a person with pink skin color.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be stupid not to maybe go on the other side of the street? And that has nothing to do with racism. That's just how we learn life. So if someone gets stabbed already the 11th time by a white person, and the next person in their village, they see a white person, they still on the same side, they haven't learned.
Yeah.
But if they switch, they have learned, and they are also smart. If we define learning as new behavior, if you have a different conditions, you have a new behavior.
Yeah.
So if you see that person the first time, that's that. The next time this happens, this person stabs you, you change this side of the street, you have learned. And how fast you make that behavior change, that's intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm basically saying with that is, I would say every person is to a certain degree racist. Because you have some biases, because you have made certain experiences in your life. Obviously, if you talk to blue people, and blue people were always unfriendly to you, the next time maybe it will be hard for you to not think they will be unfriendly to you.
Of course.
But, and I'm saying that from a point of, I try always, I don't really give a shit what you are. I try to approach people with an open mind. That's someone who's coming from that, actually, from that position say, I don't give a shit what you are, but don't try to deny certain realities of human nature. That biases is how we learn. And racism, to a certain degree, is perhaps in our minds, although we don't, maybe implicitly, maybe explicitly, but, and here, I mean, I define here in that instance racism as you discriminate based on your ethnicity or race. And if you do that, and you did that because you've learned, because when you walk through a district, a ghetto, and you get stabbed 3 times, and you don't want to get stabbed by a pink person, then you don't go there anymore. Is that racism? Maybe it is. According to that definition, it would be racism, because based on that person's ethnicity, maybe, or skin color, or how they look, maybe that's not I mean, like what they are wearing, for instance.
Yeah, how they dress is just as important. Yeah.
Does it make any sense, or am I here completely?
No, I don't think that you're. It's just, of course, controversial if you started by an opening line that says everyone is a bit racist. You know, that's of course going to be a controversial one. But if you define racism as just, let's say it like that. If you say that racism means that you are just biased to a certain extent, which is natural as we are learning and progressing through life, I don't even think that this that this should be called racism. Actually, I just think this is our natural bias, which is theoretically just a statistical background processing of what you saw through your life, and protecting and looking out for yourself and your closest ones. That is what bias is. And now the bias against racial profiles, or how people are dressed, or how people behave, how they talk, it doesn't even have to be. This is just, we can put that in the same category. The skin color of someone, or the color of their eyes, or what pants they are wearing, or what shoes they are wearing, these are all biases from previous previous experience that you, it's just statistics that are happening in the back of your head, and this is just normal. I don't think that this is even racism. It's just what you see and what you experienced. So that's
maybe
fair.
it's more like a continuum. So I made this argument, and I don't know how compelling it was. Everybody's a bit racist or very racist. It depends how much, like, how racist are you? Like, if we see that on a continuum, it's not a binary thing. It's not, are you racist or are you not?
Absolutely
it's
not.
not. It's more like, how racist are you?
Yeah.
Is it causing you trouble, or is it, or not? Like, are you a terrible person because you really, you are like a racist who is terrible to people with a certain ethnicity? Terrible. Or do you have those small biases? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You get what
I think
it's a continuum. How racist are you?
There are different ways of how to define racism, because if you say, okay, on the absolute extreme right side of the continuum, we have racism means that you think people of other color are lesser or less valuable than you. Their life is less valuable than yours. This would be straight up racism, right? This is just, you think you're something better. There's something they're worse, and these people are not as worthy of life as you are. This is racism, right? This is my definition of racism, by the way. Now, racism on the other extreme left side would be you have made your experiences in life, and someone who has pink, whose skin is of pink color. These people have always, molested you or something. Now, of course, you're gonna think that pink colored people, you're just gonna avoid them somehow, right? Not even actively, not even saying, yeah, these people are, I don't know what, but you're just gonna avoid them naturally, because your natural bias through your experience led to that. If these two extremes, and there's a continuum in between, yeah, there's many types of racists and racism, and everyone has to be at least the one on the left, right? Right. The one where you just follow your natural biases, which come from experience. This is not even racist to me. But if we define that as also being racist, then the spectrum is very, very broad, and very there are many different types of racists. Then
sure,
yeah. So, but I understand you completely. Absolutely, I understand. Yeah.
So defining it like this, then saying that every person is racist. It depends how much race, how racist are they?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Or ask differently, does that
I would say
make
everyone has
sense?
biases.
Yeah.
I would say everyone has biases. There's not one person who doesn't have biases. And these biases come also with racial profiling, with clothes profiling, everything. It's just being able to see differences in people's colors, skin colors, just comes with the subgroup of things that you have biases to. That you are biased towards. It just is part of that group, but it's not actually racist. Racist is for me when you think lesser than your own race of other people. That's what's racist to me. So I would say everyone is biased. Everyone is racially biased. Of course we are, but not everyone is racist. I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Racially biased. I'd say racially biased is the point where I definitely agree on. Everyone is racially biased somehow, at least to a small extent.
So maybe on that racist continuum, it's just like you're all the way, let's say left is the lowest, and you're racially biased, let's put it like that. And all the way on the right, you're this terrible person who does terrible things. And maybe that's something we could conclude.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, you can't deny your racial bias. There has to be a racial bias, even from non-white people towards white people. There is a bias. It's just how we work. It's just how people work. That's So
maybe I need to alter my statement I put out there in the first place. Instead of saying everybody's racist, maybe, or to a certain degree racist, maybe it's more everybody is racially biased.
Absolutely.
To a certain degree. It depends
100%,
how much.
Yeah. And the more you go to the right side,
most people.
And you start from a racial bias, and then from there's a spectrum all up until the actual racism, and you could be anywhere in between, right? So everyone is racially biased. That's the starting point for everyone, and then depending on how your life went, you could develop to the absolute extreme on the other side, which would be being actually racist. And I would phrase it like that. If I were you, I would say it like that. I would say everyone is racially biased.
Maybe I got too much framed from people like talking all the time about that topic.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, it is a topic.
But
that
it's
is
my
always
responsibility to make sense of it in the end. So I learned something right now.
Yeah.
That was helpful. All right, so let's wrap things up.
All right.
What's next for you, Miloš?
Next. Yeah, I will hopefully finish my studies in terms of CFA candidacy and become a CFA charter holder in the near future. That's the next. The very next point is my exam on the 26th of August. Otherwise,
rooting for you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's a tough one. It's a tough nut to crack, and it's very broad and also to a certain extent deep. But I'm having fun with it. I really want to learn this stuff. I really want to, get to know the stuff even better, and I'm happy to do it. And my next big thing is the exam on the 26th of August, and otherwise just same old things, working and the little time I have left, I'm trying to I'm trying to have a good time in my life and
doing stuff,
quality time, just as this one here, talking to you, my dear friend.
We have a short period on this plan, so it might worth doing something well here. So
yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, hey man, thanks very much.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Would love to have you again on the show for the fourth time.
Of course. Yeah, fourth time's a charm.
Fourth time, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much. I feel honored being a frequent guest here.
Thank you for being on the show.